So today's webinar is a very important one because I'm going to talk about what happens if you get fired as an attorney, as well as if you think you're going to get fired. And at the outset, I just want to note that most attorneys at some point in their career end up having some sort of disappointment, meaning they get fired or they're in danger of getting fired. And so I'm going to talk to you today about how to handle that, how to recognize when you may be losing a job, and sort of proactive measures to take if you feel that's going to happen. And it's not just about getting fired. I mean, I'm going to talk about work habits and ways to avoid getting fired and the things that you can do if you look like and you feel like you're in a situation where that's going to happen to you. So just realizing that at most points in your career, regardless of the state you're in, you've probably been fired before, or you're likely to get fired or at risk of getting fired. So I'm going to talk to you a lot about that today. I'm going to talk to you about the reasons people get fired but in general, like one thing that's important to understand is law firms are businesses, meaning that they have businesses to operate where they need people doing a certain type of work. But if they don't have enough work, then the business suffers and they can't afford to keep certain people around. But they're also relationship based. So if you're in a bad relationship with someone that doesn't feel good, you will feel stressed, you won't be comfortable. And it's the same thing with a law firm if that's not a good relationship. And I talk to attorneys all the time that think, everything about working in a law firm is just billing hours and that sort of thing. And that really has nothing to do with it. Another point I want to bring up just before we start is one thing that I recommend to all attorneys is to constantly be aware of the market and looking for jobs. So that doesn't mean you have to take a job, but you have to know how marketable you are in the market. And you have to know the kind of jobs that are out there in the places you want to work. And if you feel like there's some insecurity at the place you're at, then you should be looking for a job and not waiting until you get fired. And that's one of the best pieces of advice I can give you. Smart attorneys are always kind of on the lookout to see what's available in the market if things slow down. As I said earlier, at some point in your career, most attorneys get fired. Many people get fired from multiple jobs, and you have to react in a certain way. You need to find a new job, and how you react to getting fired is often going to determine the course of your career. And I've seen lots of people handle getting fired in good ways, and I've seen people can't handle this in negative ways. I've seen people wait to get fired that shouldn't wait to get fired. And how you react to this or the threat of this happening is very important to what ends up happening often to the rest of your career. And a lot of people, like if they have a negative experience in a law firm, they give up, they do things that are harmful to their career instead of realizing how to fix it. And it's important that you understand how to react if something negative is happening to you, or it looks like something negative may happen to you. For attorneys, getting fired is very difficult. It's much more difficult than people, for example, politicians having problems and not getting reelected or scandals and things. It's actually much more difficult than if you were like a blue collar worker. And a blue collar worker would just think that they can get a new position with someone else who wouldn't be as concerned about it and get mad and stomp off the job. But being an attorney is a very middle-class profession, and it's one of the most middle-class professions that there is. And when you're the middle class tends to be very dependent on what people above them think of them. And so that means they're concerned with what employers think of them. They're concerned about what clients think of them. They're concerned with what others think of them. And it doesn't happen so much with people that are more working class, or people that have a lot of money or a lot of power politically and that sort of thing. So attorneys are very dependent what others think of them. And the whole process of becoming an attorney means that it's important for them to get good grades. When they start interviewing, they want to try to get into the best law schools. They want to learn how to impress other attorneys that they're working for, judges, their litigators, clients. They want to be seen as working hard. They want to be seen as better than other people that they're working with. They want to often be seen in the office as much as possible, and they want to do whatever they can to protect their reputation. And that is very, very intense for an attorney compared to other professions. A lot of other professions are not as concerned about that, but attorneys are very concerned about that because they're representing clients and they have to be concerned about what others opposing them think of them and what other attorneys they're working think of them. And the reputation of an attorney is very, very important. It's one of the most important things that you can have. It's important for getting clients. It's important for getting employed. And in general, for most attorneys, there should be no questions or issues with them being viewed negatively. They have to avoid that. And they have to avoid that with employers and clients. It's just part of the profession. You have to have a good reputation to get referrals. You have to have a good work reputation for getting jobs. You have to have a good reputation with courts in order to do well. I mean, there's so much that's important for impressing others, looking good for attorneys compared to other professions, that it's just something that you need to keep in mind, and something that I've seen time and time again that can either help attorneys or not. So I've seen attorneys like in certain markets, like apply to like 5 or 6 firms and get interviews with all of them because they have such a good reputation. And then I've seen lots and lots of attorneys that have done things to hurt their reputation, even as that harms them from getting jobs. I had a candidate recently that had sued an employer about 10 years ago, and someone found that hurt their reputation, and they were unable, to get a job with a firm that they wanted to work with. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this mindset. Most attorneys are familiar with this mindset because they've been trying to impress teachers and things their whole career. Then they have to impress employers to get the best jobs. But it's very dangerous because your reputation is so important. If you're fired or believe you're going to get fired, or even have a bad reputation at your own firm, it can hurt you, and it can hurt the course of your career in terms of how you react. So you need to understand mindset that you need to have to avoid that. And it's critical to have this mindset in terms of how others see you. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. But for the most part, when you're an attorney, you're expected to look stable. You're expected to not show weakness, and you're expected not to have any chinks in your armor. So, for example, when an attorney goes into an interview, they need to portray weaknesses as strengths. They don't want to bring up their weaknesses in interviews. They want to try to look strong and have good answers to questions. If there's been issues in their past, they need to have good explanations to look strong. And I think that this sort of mentality has to do with just the way the profession works. So if in almost like historical views of attorneys, so an attorney's not supposed to show any weakness for their client. They're supposed to make their client look strong. And then they become very, very strong advocates for their clients. And that's just what the profession is. And other lawyers do not respect lawyers that aren't trying to do the best they can for their clients and make their clients look good. So people will represent murderers and all sorts of child, molesters and things, but they still are always fighting for them. And you need to think about, when you're in the market and when you're working somewhere, you need to be very strong and look like that there's not a lot of weaknesses in your armor in terms of how you approach things. And I think this just has something to do with the historical nature of what lawyering an attorney is. Lawyers represent other people, and they have to put on a good defense, or they have to make them look good, regardless of whether or not that person's guilty or done something wrong. And then they need to stand there in a straight face and make very good arguments of everything possible not to convey any weakness of the person in their case. One thing I think is very interesting is with good attorneys, one thing that happens is they typically will, when they're against the other side or something and someone's attacking them and right, they'll often just not respond because they don't want to engage. And when someone's saying something negative to them about their performance, they won't engage. I always noticed with recruiters, we would always hire people from very strong backgrounds. And then when they did something wrong and you brought it up to them, they often would not respond because they don't want to engage to look bad. And so this is also an aspect of the profession. But if you look weak and you portray weakness to other people when you're in trouble, whether or not you've lost a job or whatever happened, it's often very difficult for you to get interviews when you're conveying any type of weakness. And I think the reason is that clients of attorneys want people that look more in control, more stable, and more put together than they are. And the best attorneys should look competent and as formidable as possible. I was working in a New York firm one summer when I was in law school, like a big New York firm. And there was a partner that was talking to the associates, and he was the partner with the most business in the firm. And he was talking to the associates and summer associates. And he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, when I walk into a room, I need to look like the best dressed person, the most competent person, because that's what clients expect. They expect someone to look the most competent and the best. And so this is one thing that's also part of the profession. The more in control you look, the more professional you look, the more put together and in control of everything you look, the better you're going to do. And you need to realize when you're working in a law firm, when you're working for other people, those people are your clients. So the partners you're working for are your clients. If you're in-house, the people you're working for are your clients. And so they expect someone that has it together and looks strong and is responsive and just doing and looking very good to them. And so the attorneys that have problems with other attorneys and end up getting fired, they often they often view themselves in a negative way. Instead of picking themselves up, come extremely disappointed in themselves, and often view these negative reactions and things that to them is things that are going to be black marks on their record and hurt them permanently. And you can always pick yourself up, and I'm going to teach you how to do that, but you have to realize that no matter what happens to you, you have to show strength, and you have to look competent, and you have to look good. And I apologize for saying all this, because I know that for a lot of you, this is probably something that you don't want to hear or is new to you. The attorneys that look like the best advocates for others and for themselves typically do the best in the profession, even when bad things happen to them. So a lot of people, if they get fired or they're having a bad experience at a firm, they will leave the practice of law completely and do something else, thinking that there's something wrong with them when all these things are fixable. Other people will, instead of working in a law firm, instead of finding a law firm that might be a better match for them from a cultural perspective or for the type of work they're doing, instead of doing that, they often leave and go in government or in-house positions that may be beneath them and not have as much of a future. And it's sad because, you may have experienced a lot of disappointment. People experience disappointment at all points in their career. Law students experience disappointment when they don't get the best grades or get the best jobs. People experience disappointment when they get laid off. People experience disappointment when they get negative reviews. People experience disappointment at all points in their careers. And it's sad that people end up quitting the practice of law because of this. I mean, a legal career is a long thing. I mean, it starts from the time you're 25 or 26 usually, and can last like, another 60 years. So having early disappointments or even disappointments like 20 years into your career is just completely unnecessary, and something that happens to a lot of attorneys, and it shouldn't. I mean, you should realize that anything bad that happens to you is you can recover from. I see a lot of people that leave the practice of law for a couple of years because they may have issues with their families or something that they need to take care of, and then they give up because they think because they left, they can never return, and all this stuff is unnecessary. And I'm just bringing that up because I spoke to this week with two women that left the practice of law for 2 years, and they had lots of work when they were practicing. They gave away all their work because they had family problems, and now they've been searching for senior associate positions, which for a 25-year plus attorney is crazy. So people will give up when bad things happen to them. So I'm going to tell you, a list of some of the most common scenarios that happen in law firms. They probably have happened to you, and the ways to handle them. A lot of times people may be spoken very harshly to about their performance. They'll go into performance reviews, and all of a sudden, they think they might be doing okay, but they're warned that they're in danger of losing their job or getting fired, or they're given a lot of negative feedback about their performance. One thing to understand that's very important is when you're a starting attorney, when you have less than 18 months of experience, usually people will review your work, and they'll often do it negatively, depending on the economy. But what they're really doing is they're just trying to get you to pick up your performance and start performing like a competent attorney. So most attorneys with not a lot of experience, are not always going to get the most positive performance reviews. I remember in the second firm I worked in, it was a New York firm, their Los Angeles office, and there was a partner there that did reviews, and he had been trained at another big firm, LA-based firm, probably like one of the top 2 or 3 firms. And I was sitting next to an associate, and he went in and like closed the door, and I could hear him just barking, at this guy and giving him a horrible review, even though this guy had been working like 12 hours a day, like 6 days a week, and just very, very harsh on him. And I remember there was a mid-level associate there that was doing very well. And he said, yeah, he does that with everyone because he's trying to get their performance up. He scares them. He makes them afraid of making errors. He makes sure that they think through the things they're working on. But he was doing that with everyone. So everyone in the firm that was young was getting negative reviews, and that was just the style of that firm. Not all firms are like that. They may not do that because they need bodies and all sorts of reasons, but this is a very common scenario for young attorneys. It also can be a scenario if you join a new firm that has different work standards than you're at. You may get negative reactions because they're trying to get you to improve your performance and react in a certain way. So you react by taking that information seriously and doing, your best. Sometimes firms will give young attorneys negative reviews because their hours aren't high enough, but they won't tell them that. They will just not make them feel good. And once they increase their hours, then bad reviews stop. Or once they stop making mistakes and things that young attorneys make, then that stops. They may be being pushed to be more thorough or doing other things. And you don't really learn how to be a lawyer in law school. You're just thrown into a law firm and all of a sudden expected to write a certain way or to think through matters a certain way, to not miss certain things. And so really what happens to young attorneys is that you're being trained when you go to a law firm to practice law in a certain way, and you often have no idea how to do that. And you need to be trained to do that. And people make all sorts of mistakes as young attorneys that they won't make later on. So when you get a negative review like that, it often doesn't mean that you have to leave. It's just you have to pick up your performance, and you should take that as a gift because you're being trained as a young attorney to do the best possible work to whatever degree that firm requires a good performance. And the better firms will typically often give the harshest reviews because they're working for the biggest clients that need, the best work done. And so that's important. Law firms, by the way, do not want to fire you most of the time. They only will do so unless they have to. When they fire you, they're losing a revenue stream. So if you're working and you're billing out at $500 an hour or whatever as a first year associate, that's $1 million a year in revenue. So if you leave, they're losing $20,000 a week of work that you could be doing and potential profit, or $80,000 a month. And they're paying you a certain amount of money, but they're losing that. So they don't want to fire you. It's very expensive for them to do it. It's a lot of work. Then they have to go and interview people and recruit people and spend attorney time doing that. And so they really do prefer to fix you instead of hiring someone else because they're losing money if they have to. And then it's a lot. I mean, if you think about it from the law firm's perspective, losing that revenue. And, if these statements, start coming, give me 1 second here, with statements that you're a bad attorney, or it seems, clear that your reviewers don't like you, it can be a cause for concern. I mean, there are a lot of things that attorneys need to learn when they're young attorneys. They need to be thorough. They need to not make certain mistakes. They need to turn in the type of assignments they're given and answer the questions that they're asked. And they need to look at, what other attorneys are doing to be good. They need to log into systems and see what more senior attorneys are doing. Most law firms have, repositories of work that other attorneys have done, and you need to do the best job you possibly can. And learn from other people, meaning ask senior associates what's required in mid-level associates, or anytime you're getting certain types of negative feedback from the firm. So you have to be very cognizant of that. And that's at all levels. I mean, at all levels, you may have been trained at a certain firm and you go into a new firm and that firm has different standards, and then you need to rise up to those standards. And if you're told many times that it might be a good idea for you to look for a new position, then you're in trouble. And so anytime that happens, the law firm's just saying to you, this is not working out. In response to that, you need to take action. Yeah. So anytime you're in a position where the law firm is telling you need to look for a new position, then you're in trouble and you should start looking for a new position immediately. In most cases, that's not something that you can fix. They have made a decision, then you need to start looking for a job very aggressively. When I say very aggressively, I mean, you should be applying to pretty much every open position you can find in your practice area, regardless of the size firm. You should be doing everything you can to get a position. And, and I can talk to you a little bit about that today, maybe when we do Q&A at the end of the webinar. But you really do need to take decisive action if you're told to look for a new job. And sometimes law firms will give you time to look for a new job. Other times they may just give you a short period of time to look for a new job. But if you need to look for a new job, you need to move as quickly as possible. And you need to do it without your ego and applying to every possible place you can. And that goes for any stage of your career. When you're in that position, you need to start getting out there with a lot of confidence and finding a new place while you're still employed, if that's all possible. Sometimes people make serious mistakes that just damage the brand irreparably in the eyes of the law firm. So one thing you need to understand also, when you're in a law firm, you're a product, even though you're providing a service, it's a service business, you're a product of the law firm. And as a product, you have certain characteristics, which would be the quality of work you do, things that your relationships with other attorneys, how you make other attorneys feel about themselves, your commitment to the firm, your ability to go out there and write papers and do other things to build up your brand, even to get clients. I mean, you're a product. And so you need to understand that at all points in your career. And as a product, you should continually get better and better and better and better. It's interesting. I grew up in the Detroit area, and one time this guy that was one of the top 5 executives at General Motors brought over a new Corvette to the house of one of my friends. And at my friend's house, there was also my friend, his dad was president of Volkswagen. And so he took me for a ride in this Corvette. And he said, the thing I don't like about these Corvettes is that, in order to improve the car, each year all they do is they put new fenders on and they change the way it looks and stuff. But at Volkswagen, like what we do is we make a car and then we just, it may look the same for a long time, but we keep improving it, like making the performance better and the gas mileage better and fit and finish better and all these different things. So they're always improving the product. And you need to understand that as working in any law firm, you're a product and you should always be improving the product, and that means improving the type of lawyer you are. But many times people will make mistakes that will just completely damage their brand in the eyes of a law firm. Sometimes people will drink too much at a party, or sometimes people will lie about something. Sometimes people will say something to a superior that's considered, that the superior is very upset about. Sometimes people will take too much time off. Sometimes people will miss major deadlines. Sometimes people will get sued for sexual harassment or lose a significant client due to incompetence. I've seen a lot of attorneys drink too much at parties or firm events, and just that's not good. And they make mistakes. Other firms, you can go there and everyone gets blasted at parties, but you have to understand kind of the atmosphere that you're in. I saw one attorney that was like literally a couple of weeks away from making partner at an AmLaw 100 law firm, and he'd been there like 9 years. And a partner asked him if he had sent a letter to a client, and I guess it was like on a Monday or something. And he said, "Yes, I sent it over the weekend." And then the partner logged into the system and saw that he didn't send it over the weekend, that after the partner asked him if he'd sent it, he hadn't sent it, and that he literally ended up getting fired, like asked to leave that day because he lied to this partner. So lying is bad. Insulting superiors is bad. People will say things to superiors that are insulting. And all of a sudden, just because of that, the law firm will stop working with them. I've seen men take paternity leave for 2 or 3 months and then come back, and the law firms don't like that. I've seen people fail the bar and then all of a sudden decide they want to take a 3-week vacation and get fired. I've seen that happen with lots of people. I had one candidate recently that had been up working for 2 or 3 nights in a row, like working very, very late, and you're surviving on like 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And he was a first-year associate, and he was supposed to be at a document signing with a client at a certain time, like at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he slept in and missed a deadline. And because of that, as a first-year associate, he got fired. People that get sued for sexual harassment, that's something I've seen happen too, with secretaries and all sorts of things. You need to be careful. I've seen partners lose their jobs because they'd had some kind of relationship with a paralegal or something in the firm, and the firm found out about it. I saw one guy where he'd had a relationship with a paralegal 5 or 6 years previously, and he had a huge book of business. He was a partner at a major law firm in Chicago, and it came out that he'd done that. And because he was considered a superior of that, someone that could, even though she wasn't working with him, someone that was a superior, the law firm fired him, and he had a huge book of business, and he ended up leaving the practice of law and becoming going to work in some kind of hedge fund or something, which may have been a better job for him, but literally his legal career ended because of that. I've seen people forget to do something just very mundane, like when you're doing discovery responses in California, you're supposed to attach something called a verification. And a verification just is from the client saying, yes, these documents are what they say, and signed, or maybe it's from the attorney, I don't remember. But I saw someone that was an 8th-year associate at a major law firm, had gone to Harvard Law School, been in Harvard Law Review, all these sorts of things. And then she forgot to attach this to a document request, her response to a document request, and it turned into this huge thing where all these things were deemed admitted that because she hadn't done that properly. And it cost the firm hundreds of thousands of dollars in time to overcome it. So there's just so many things that can happen. You need to be very, very careful when you're practicing law. And these are just some examples, but I see examples like this all the time. And, think about it. Partner in a major law firm with a huge book of business loses his job and has to do something else, or someone close to being partner loses their job because they tell a lie. I mean, all these things can happen. So you just need to be very, very careful. And then when they do happen, you need to be able to pick yourself up. Sometimes people will rush through assignments. Sometimes people will, make mistakes in assignments. They're asked to do something when they don't have the time, and then they rush through it and don't do a good job. And that gives a very bad reputation and gets them in trouble. So, sleeping in, not turning down work when you're not able to, do good work on the things you already have, and not learning how to turn down work in the right way. Sometimes allowing your personal life to bleed over into your work life. I had one woman that I know that left the practice of law. She was working for this partner that used to sit her down and tell her all these different things about her personal life. And one day, this associate came in and started talking about her personal life and some weekend tryst she had with some guys she'd met on a plane or something. I don't even remember what it was. And the partner didn't like that. And she lost her job and ended up leaving the practice of law. I mean, again, like protecting your reputation with the people that you're working for, having your guard up and realizing that you can make sometimes very serious mistakes that can hold direction of your career in a different way. And so you have to remember that everything you do is about your brand, and you need to be very, very careful. Now, this is a lot. I mean, I understand that what I'm saying can be scary to you, because you can think, I can't make these mistakes. And, there are certain firms where these sorts of things won't be taken seriously. Typically, they're firms that have a ton of work. The culture's very permissive, and there's firms where they're not. And often, you have to find a firm that has a culture that matches you, that you're comfortable with, and you're comfortable with the people. And not all firms are like that. So, many times these problems could be avoided if you're at the right firm, but you have to be very in tune with the culture. And certain things maybe, certain people may get involved in different political issues in the firm and take sides. I've seen people, you have to be very careful. I saw one guy that just recently that was a partner in a major Phoenix law firm, and he'd been there for 25 years, and there was some sort of internal political rift where a couple of attorneys took one side, and then the other attorneys kind of ganged up on them, and this guy lost his job after 25 years because of that. So you just need to be very careful. And most law firms will often fire you for these sorts of things, or it can hurt your ability to advance in the future. I've seen people where they make some mistake like 3 or 4 years previously, and then when they're up for partner, they're told, oh, this mistake harmed your brand. You're not going to make partner, even though they invested 3 more years, of their life in the firm. And this can be very, very upsetting. When this sorts of things happen, many people feel like giving up. They feel like because these mistakes were made or they have these problems, that they give up, and and it's sad because these sorts of things happen to most attorneys, and when they do happen, there's a proper way to react and an improper way to react. But you just need to always be aware that you're a brand wherever you are. Even if you're at a firm where you're considering moving to a better firm, or you're still going to have a brand at your old firm, and people will, if you have done a good job there, they will talk positively about you the rest of your career. If you're nice to people in your firm, they will talk positively about you the rest of your career. But if you burn bridges, you're going to be up against some issues that you'll need to fix. And a brand is always recoverable. I mean, think about all the brands that have had all the, all sorts of problems and then resurrected themselves. And you can do the same thing. It's that way with products in the market where, I mean, for example, Chrysler used to build the worst cars imaginable, and they fixed that. Different Kias, like, Hyundais used to be like the cheapest and worst cars you could buy. Now they're very good companies, and they learn from their mistakes. So you can do the same thing, but you're a product, and you need to always realize that you can fix your product, but but you don't necessarily need to quit. Sometimes law firms will get you to quit or give you bad reviews and make you feel badly about themselves because they don't have enough work. And so they're just trying to, save money and put it on you. So it's not, they don't get a bad reputation, but whatever happens to you, you need to just kind of remember from those lessons and improve your performance in the future, wherever you go. And it can actually be very positive when negative things happen to you because it can make you a stronger attorney and it can make you learn the things that you need to do to improve your brand. Sometimes you'll upset an attorney in your practice area. Maybe there's only one attorney or a couple different attorneys that give you work. And for whatever reason, you upset them. Maybe there's a personality clash. Maybe they didn't like the quality of your work. I mean, all sorts of things can happen. And when they happen, you need to be very careful and maybe start looking for a new job. If that person's upset with you, it can be very difficult to overcome that. Sometimes you can, but you can't always do that. And if that happens, you need to be very careful and maybe look for a job. And lots of firms will hire associates, counsels, partners, and to work with one attorney. And often those attorneys may run through a series of attorneys. So I was at one firm where that firm would hire an associate generally to work with this one partner I'm thinking of. And that partner would typically be on very, very good terms with that associate for a couple of years. And then something would happen, something clicked, the partner just kind of wanted people there for only a couple of years and he would get sick of them and then kind of push them to the side. And it often wasn't the fault of the attorney. It was just how that partner operated. It was very difficult to get along with. And so you may be in that type of situation. And if you're in a situation where you're working for one person, that can be very dangerous if things go wrong. If you've upset the only attorney in your firm that gives you the work and get on their bad side, then you should take action. And by the way, that can be a very positive situation working for one person. So if you're working for one person and that person has a lot of business, and that person is giving you tons and tons of work, oftentimes you can be in a position where that person retires and you take over their book of business, or that person, because you're doing such good work for them, will have the ability to make you a partner later. So there can be advantages to it, but you have to be careful. There's a rule that someone taught me once, and I think it's kind of true, is that 1/3 of the people that you meet generally will not like you, the other third will like you, and the other third won't care. So that's just kind of a general rule of how people look at each other. And your goal should be to find a firm with a culture where more than 1/3 of the people like you and less than 1/3 of the people don't like you. I mean, you need to go into a firm where you're working with people that identify with you. And different firms have different cultures. There are firms where people are predominantly one religion. There are firms where people were formerly college athletes. There are firms where people, the majority of them may be gay. I mean, there's firms where, people are all from just grew up in the same town. I mean, there's all sorts of different firms and cultures. There's firms where everyone drinks a lot and uses drugs. There's firms where everyone has a family. There's firms where everyone's divorced. I mean, you have to find a firm that is similar to you and share similar values so you find more people that like you. And if someone doesn't like you that you're working with, often there's not much you can do and you need to move on. Your reputation in most firms is set very, very quickly when you go there too, by the way. People will reach conclusions about you based on what you do when you start your new firm. So you need to give it all you can to make people like you and look indispensable. And so, just realizing that you could be in a position where you're working with people you don't like, and that can be a problem. You need to find a firm where you're comfortable with the culture and where you click and where people see the world in a similar way as you do. It's interesting, but I mean, it's true. In the United States, I mean, you have half the country who are Democrats and you have half the country that are Republicans. There are firms that are very, very left wing, like, for example, Perkins Coie. There's been things about that firm. And so the Trump administration has been not doing work with them, as well as Paul Weiss and things. And so, but if you were at one of those firms, you're obviously going to be better off sharing their political views than you would be having opposite political views, because people take this very, very seriously. So if you're a hardcore Democrat, you should probably be working in firms with a lot of Democrats. And if you're a firm that are a hardcore Republican, you should probably be working in firms with other Republicans. That's just how it works. I had a guy once that that he was looking for a job, and he was very, very right wing. He was part of this Federal Society and all this stuff, and very, very dedicated to right wing politics. And he got a job, a mid-sized firm and kind of a smaller firm in San Francisco, which was kind of very rare. And they loved him. He clicked with them. He liked them a lot. Everyone liked each other. They all shared similar political views, and in San Francisco, of course, that's that kind of right wing politics isn't exactly normal. But instead of taking that job, he took a job with this large firm that was very, very liberal, and had a horrible experience there, and actually left and became a contract attorney for a while because he just had such a bad experience, and people he wasn't well received. And so sometimes what's happening to you may just be because of not clicking with the people there, and it's nothing wrong with you. But if you're not clicking with the people, then those people are not going to like you, and they may be overly critical of someone that they would normally, and that if they were making the same mistakes. Sometimes, and a lot of times, people get laid off from firms. It's very common with corporate attorneys when the firm runs out of work. It's very common for real estate attorneys. Sometimes firms will lose big clients and they'll get laid off. I mean, sometimes a bunch of cases will settle, and all of a sudden all the litigators don't have any work to do, even though they've been working like crazy hours for years. So people do get laid off, and often it's beyond your control. And if this happens, you need to take action quickly. And there's traditionally has been recessions in the United States, like about every 8 years. And when that happens, people will often be laid off. And so you will see that work starts to slow down. And when work starts to slow down, that can show you that there might be a problem. It could be a short-term problem, or it could be a long-term problem. But if that happens, you need to be aware, to be able to take action. I mean, you should be able to, start looking for jobs. People, by the way, you should always be, and I said this at the beginning of this webinar, you should always be aware of the market. You should always know what's going on in the market. You can use Indeed and LinkedIn, for example, but you can also use Law Crossing, which looks at all the websites of all the different firms. And even if they're not advertised, it will show you the jobs out there. But you always need to be aware of the market because you're a product. You need to understand, where's a better home for me. And if you're uncomfortable in a firm, you can interview with places, even if you don't have interest in immediately taking the job. I mean, you always need to be trying to make sure that your product's in the right place. And just because you don't get enough work at a firm doesn't mean you need to feel bad about yourself, but you should always try to be in a position where you have a lot of work. I want to make one point too about layoffs that's very important. So when law firms lay off people, they will often lay off lots of people, but the people don't get laid off are usually the ones that are able to stay busy and are very good at networking within the firm to get work, and have been the ones that have impressed the firm the most, that have worked the longest hours. And so if you're laid off, then you're usually not part of that group. Now, it doesn't mean that that's not true, but as an attorney, your job is always to do whatever you can to get work. So that's the job of partners. Partners need to go out and generate business and always have work. And the same thing goes with associates. Associates always need to have work. So you need to be doing whatever you can to network and create relationships with people that have work. So when things slow down, you're still busy and you have people on your side that are saying, we really need this person. We don't want to lay them off. And that's the problem, by the way, of getting laid off, is because when you're laid off, law firms that see you're laid off believe that you're part of the group that wasn't able to get work and wasn't able to impress the right people. So that becomes something that's kind of viewed negatively. And so you have to be able to, when that happens, you have to learn how to take action, and you have to learn how to find other positions. Often that will not be firms of the same caliber you're at, because if people are trying to get jobs at one law firm, like a large law firm, the law firm is always going to prefer to hire people that are currently employed versus those that aren't employed. So if you're suddenly hit with a layoff, you need to probably look at firms that aren't of the same caliber, because those firms are going to be comparing you to people that aren't laid off. Sometimes people are just fired for no reason at all. I was working with a woman several years ago, and she was working there and thought she was doing a good job. No one had ever said anything too negative to her about her performance or anything. She was gone to Berkeley and was working at, one of the largest firms in Palo Alto, I think. And one day someone just walked into her office and said, "This isn't a good culture fit for us. We're going to ask you to leave." I mean, this just came like she just didn't even expect it. And that's pretty scary. And so they basically told her they didn't like her and asked her to leave because they said it was a bad cultural fit. So that can happen. And so is the firm you're at a good cultural fit? Do people seem to like you? Are you, and what side are you on? So a lot of times in most law firms, there are people that are for the side of management, that are someone that doesn't seem like they're creating problems, someone that the law firm believes they can trust, someone that there's always groups of people that are going around saying negative things about their firm and their job and closing doors and things like that. And law firms know who those people are because they're just social groups and they can pick up cues and things. So you don't want to be on that side, because if you're on that side, you're considered adverse to the law firm. And why would the law firm want someone there that's adverse? They need to keep the law firm to the best they can with people there that are supportive and doing a good job and not making problems. It's like that with any social group. A social group will expel people from that social group that aren't a good fit, and will try to encourage people that are a good fit to come in there. And that's law firms are constantly doing that. They're constantly churning through people and trying to find people that are committed to them, doing good work, and are on their side. And if you're not on their side, they will pick it up, and that's not a good thing. Sometimes people are told that they're not going to make partner and are urged to find a new job. Sometimes they're told that and given a year. Sometimes they're given 6 months. This is very common for senior associates. It happens at large firms all over. It's not something that is uncommon, and many law firms just don't have a place for more partners unless you have a lot of business, or their partnership ranks are full. They're happy. They're making money from the associates and splitting up the money, and they don't want other people to come in and take a share of that. And that's often nothing that you have any control over. And if you stay in a large law firm, it's going to happen pretty much to almost all people, but not all, but it's going to happen to the majority of people that are associates and maybe up for partner. That's just how it is. It's nothing that you have any control over, and nothing that you need to necessarily worry about. You just need to realize that that's probably coming down the pike at some point if you're not among the very top performers. One thing I would just bring up that's important to understand as well. So when you're a junior associate in a law firm, your work will typically be aggressively criticized, not all the time, but they will point out issues and things for the first year and a half. After that point, you start becoming pretty competent, and you start being able to do the work in a way that they like and valuable to the firm. And law firms really make the most money from attorneys that have around 2 to 6 years of experience. Those attorneys are mid-level associates. Their billing rates aren't that high. They can do work. It looks good to clients giving them the work because their billing rates not as high. The billing rates are not compatible partners. But then what happens? And so when you're 2 to 6 years, law firms will say things like you're on the right track, you're doing a great job. They'll give very nice and complimentary performance reviews. And then when you get more senior, then performance reviews will change and start not being as good. So that's just kind of how it works. You need to understand that. And that's how it works at most firms. Some firms won't do that. A lot of firms have non-equity partner roles that they put a lot of people in. Other firms will keep people indefinitely as associates, even some large New York firms. But that's kind of the general thing to realize as you get more senior, that your job is going to be at risk. And there's a trade-off there. So you're basically, when you're young, if you take a job in a large law firm, you're trading a ridiculously high salary at a large law firm, and they do pay a lot, to be in a position where you're servicing large clients, working long hours, but you're never going to be generating any significant business because it's impossible. I've seen attorneys like at major law firms, even when they're young, like 1 or 2 years, like conclude that, unless I bring in some, a Fortune 500 company as a client, I'm probably not going to be able to make partner here. And so they leave and they do things like, I've seen people start personal injury firms or family law firms and be extremely successful because they don't want to buy into this thing where they're front loading all of their compensation only to have a very difficult time being employed. Why not start something now and build up, my own law firm business or do something? And That's actually very common, something that you may want to think about, because if you're at a large law firm, is that a good long-term move? Because you could leave a large law firm after getting like 3 years of training and then start your own business doing something else. And I've seen attorneys become ridiculously successful that have left large law firms to do that, or people that literally just get out of law school and start their own practice. I was looking at some office space. I've told this story not too long ago, but I was looking at some office space in Malibu, California, where I live. And it was in a former courthouse in Malibu, and there was an attorney that had this office that was just awesome. It was like the old courthouse itself, instead of like all the offices and things part of the office. And then he was like 3 or 4 years out of law school. And I said, is this office, you must be paying a lot of money for this. And she said, yeah, he started one of the small offices, and he graduated from law school and started a trust and estates law firm. And not only does he have this office, but he just bought a $5 million house. So, I mean, you can do very, very well as a trust and estates attorney that just started his own business with no experience. I mean, you can do very well often if you start your own law firm. But when you get more senior, it becomes very difficult for law firms to keep you. What is the reason why? It's pretty simple. If a partner is billing at $1,400 an hour, and there's a senior associate billing out at like $1,100 or $1,200 an hour, the client's going to prefer to have the partner do the work in most cases, because it's a partner, not a senior associate. And not only that, but partners typically make a lot more money when they do work on their own than when they give work to other people. So if a partner does work on their own, they bill out at $1,400 an hour, maybe they keep 600 of it. But if they give the work to someone else, maybe they keep 200 of it. So it's very difficult to convince often people to keep people around that are senior. I had an incident just this morning where I was talking to a patent attorney that had a small firm in Ohio about hiring one of my candidates. And that patent attorney said, why would I give this guy work to do? Because if I give him work to do, I got to give him a percentage of it. And why? And if I do the work myself, then I'm going to keep a lot more. And so, there's always a competition for, are you the right person to give the work when you get more senior? And is it profitable for us to do that? And, law firms are businesses, and so they make these type of decisions. And so you always need to realize that when you're in a law firm, you're a product, and business is making decisions about you that are in its best interest. It often has nothing to do with your performance or anything. It just is like, how do you fit in with their business model? And large law firms typically have different business models than smaller law firms. And it's just important to understand that. And, and senior associates always find jobs coming from large law firms and other firms, but they're just usually not of the same caliber. Many senior associates will continue trying to jump between larger and larger law firms their whole career without business. And I've seen people do it. And I have lots of attorneys that I've been working for years that are able somehow to get jobs in other large law firms, but they're usually just for a short period of time when the law firm has the work. And it can be, very devastating for these attorneys when they find out, I've kind of exhausted all the large law firms that will give me work. And they often are very focused on only working in large law firms instead of going someplace where they, could potentially have a longer term career. Sometimes, you may be in a firm where you have a feeling that you're going to lose your position because you see all these other people losing their positions, and it can be very scary to you. You don't know why they're losing their positions. They often may not talk about it, but lots of people are losing their jobs, and that doesn't give you a sense of safety wherever you are. So if you don't have a sense of safety, that can be scary. And many times law firms will be shrinking. Sometimes branch offices, weird things can happen there. And if you don't have a sense of security at your firm, then that's a warning sign, and you should be scared. And often, if you're working for certain partners, you can tell them, like, this doesn't make me comfortable. And they, if they say to you, you're not going to get laid off, like you're not going to be let go, like we like you, then that can happen. I was at a firm once where I'd quit, and they came to me and talked to me, and I said, I don't have a sense of security because, this is just, I've seen these people being asked to leave. And the firm said, well, they didn't really fit in, with our culture. All they would do is talk about what great school they went to, and didn't really fit in with, the kind of people we are. And so that gave me a sense of security, but when I didn't have a sense of security. So sometimes you'll get vague indirect statements that don't give you a lot of security. So I was working at a firm once and I had a bad experience working with one partner that I came out of it and she didn't like me. And then I sat down with another partner I was working with and I talked to him and he said, well, she's not going to give you work anymore. And also her friends aren't going to give you work anymore. And when that happened, I got very insecure and started thinking about doing something else because I was like, wow, I pissed this one person off, but I pissed these other people off. And that's definitely not something that's going to help me. And maybe I should start looking for a new job or thinking about doing something else. Sometimes you're in a firm and you may not just be getting any work. People may not be assigning you work and you really often don't know why that's happening. So when you're working for any partner, or anyone in a law firm, your objective should be to do as good of a job as possible. So they give you follow-up work. And that's the job of an associate, or that's the job of a partner that depends on other partners for work. They need to be trying to generate work from those people and getting those people to give them work. And if you're not getting work from people and they're giving work to others, then that's a warning sign that that you may be doing something wrong. So you always need to be getting work. The thing that's most important, and I said this earlier in the legal profession, is that you need to always be working. You always need to have work to do. Partners are always trying to get work from clients. Associates should always be trying to get work from partners. And if you're not getting work and other people are, then that's a problem. Sometimes the firm just doesn't have the work, and that's another issue. But if you're not getting enough work, you need to go to a place where there is a lot of work. And firms with a lot of work are firms that can make people partner. Firms with a lot of work are firms that are doing something right. Firms with a lot of work, you're more likely to stay employed than unemployed. And firms with a lot of work are less likely to lay you off or let you go. So you need to be in an atmosphere, with, where you're getting work. And if you're not getting work, that's a problem. People give work to people that they like. People give work to people that do really good work for them. So if you're doing better work than others, then you're likely to get work. I remember when I was at my first firm, Quinn Emanuel, I had a lot of work. I had so much work that they were bringing in file cabinets, like stackable file cabinets, for me to, keep all my files in because I had a lot of work. And then there was a woman next to me that never had anything to do, and she was a very smart woman that had gone to Columbia. She was getting work from people, but she wasn't getting repeat work. So you always need to be in a position where you're getting repeat work from people, where they seek you out and give you work because you do good work and they like you. And so you need to do whatever you can to be in that position in the firm. And if for whatever reason people don't like your work or they don't like you, then you're in trouble. And there are lots of firms that have so much work they don't need to play favorites. You can typically advance at firms that have a lot of work, and but you need to be in a position always where you're getting a lot of work. And if you're not getting a lot of work and you don't see that changing, then you need to start looking for a job because that's a danger sign if other people have work, and it's not something that's always fixable. People, attorneys that they don't like, attorneys that get a bad reputation for doing bad work, attorneys that are difficult to work with, and don't learn from their mistakes or really try their hardest, are people that law firms will often not give work to. Sometimes it's very common. So I work with partners. Probably half my practice is working with partners. Partners will often have their compensation cut. They may, be made a non-equity partner when they were an equity partner and put on salary. They were, when people are new partners in a lot of firms, so law firms will make associates like a non-equity partner when if they've done really, really good work and impress the right people, but then they're given a few years to build a book of business. They're unable to do it, and then the law firm will let them go. Or they may be a partner who's lost most of their business and suddenly doesn't have anything to do. So partners get in this position all the time. It's very scary, by the way. So large law firms will, if you do really good work for a period of time and you've worked a lot of hours and impressed the right people, they will often make you a non-equity partner. But when you become a non-equity partner, your role is to not only get work from the firm, but to bring in outside work. And if that doesn't happen after a few years, the law firm will let you go. I had an instance where there was a guy that I worked with, And I'd actually placed him in the New York office of the Los Angeles office of a major New York law firm. And he was a good attorney. He worked very, very hard for several years and was made a non-equity partner, which was an amazing thing because the law firm hadn't made any partners in this 75 person office and probably 5 years before he made partner. And he was very excited about it. They gave him $20,000 to furnish his office and put in a nice desk and wallpaper and all that sort of stuff in a big office and made him a non-equity partner. But he got to the stage where he was about 2 years out. He didn't have a lot of billable hours and he hadn't been able to bring in clients. And he left the firm and actually ended up becoming a recruiter in our company. He didn't like that and that didn't work out. And then he kind of bounced around to a couple in-house jobs and then ended up starting his own practice. So I'm just telling you, it can be very dangerous even if you make partner in a lot of these firms, because then you still need to get business. There's some very good firms out there that, by the way, that do have a lot of non-equity partners. White and Case is an example, and where else? Good firms, Kirkland and Ellis will have a lot of non-equity partners, and they have enough work that they can keep people busy and don't let people go after a few years if they don't have any business. But it just depends on the firm, and other firms will just make people counsel and have plenty of work for them. It depends on the firm. But you need to understand too that when you're in a law firm, just because you make partner doesn't mean that you're going to have any employment stability. Like law firm partners lose jobs all the time. And so if you're a law firm partner and you're at risk of that, then you should also be looking for a job. There are firms where I was at this with my second law firm. They had all of these partners that had come over from another firm and didn't have any business. And so I was on this floor of this building, and it started out like at the beginning of the year on my floor. It was multiple floors where there were maybe 10 or 12 partners. And over the course of the year, there were like 4 left because these people without business have been asked to leave. So, if you're in a position as a partner where you don't have enough work and you're not able to bring in business, then, that's a situation where partners need to look for jobs. So if you're an associate on this call, I'm just showing you kind of what the future looks like if you become a partner. And it's not like you make partner and everything's good. It's like you make partner and there's even more significant challenges on you to develop business depending on the firm. Sometimes groups will leave in law firms. This is a very common thing. I speak with probably at least one attorney per week where there was a group of attorneys that were giving them work, and those attorneys left, or it was one attorney that was giving them work, and that attorney left and took all their work with them. When law firms hire lateral partners, they often only want the partner because they have other associates there that can do the work. So because they only want the partner will leave and leave the associates behind. And then, what is that attorney to do if there's no one left in their practice area, or there's no one, left that can give them work? Then they need to leave. And this is another danger that happens depending on the firm you're in. I mean, I'm sure if you open up a legal newspaper, any legal newspaper you open up, there's always going to be stories about attorneys leaving and going to other firms. And you need to think, well, what's going to happen to those associates? So is the group of people you're with safe? Is there a lot of lateral movement among partners? Are the partners you're working for, do they seem like the type of people that are going to stick around? Were you very close to those partners that left? So if you're very close to those partners that left and all your relationships were with those partners that left, then you can be seen as someone that is an enemy of the firm. And if that happens, you need to find a job very, very quickly. And, you need to take action and realize that whatever business unit was at that firm that was supporting you is no longer there, or whatever alliances you had in that firm are no longer there. And, these are all very scary things, by the way, and I'm going to tell you how to react. But this is how law firms work, and understanding how law firms work and everything I've told you so far could save your career. I mean, it's very smart, watching this and listening to this, because you can realize the danger signs and things where you need to take action, look for jobs. But my biggest piece of advice to you also is, to be politically aware of this stuff, to be aware of your brand, to be aware of situations when you should start looking for work. And anytime you're in a situation where there's any form of danger, you need to be thinking about your career and what happens next, and trying to be in a position where you're employed as opposed to unemployed. It's much easier to get a job when you're employed than when you're unemployed. If you're unemployed, you're competing against people that are employed. If you're unemployed, there may be questions about how well you conducted yourself politically, how well you got work. So you're better off always looking for a job when you're employed as opposed to unemployed. So how do you react? It's very, very critical to be aware of the danger signs. I always talk to people every week that have lost their jobs or are in danger of losing their jobs. And here's kind of how people tend to react when that happens. So the first thing is the attorney will pick themselves up and keep trying. So, if you're, haven't lost your job or you're having a bad experience, you can think seriously about staying and fixing the problems that maybe you're having, or you can leave and look for a new position. Sometimes attorneys will go to a law firm, and then the second the law firm says something negative to them, will think they need to start looking for a job, and they will bounce around to jobs for a long time, trying not to be criticized. And when they are criticized, they just react negatively and start looking for a job. And that's not, the right reaction all the time. A lot of attorneys that lose jobs will do what I recommend, which is to start a very aggressive search where they're looking for a lot of different opportunities, and they're looking at big firms and small firms and doing whatever they possibly can to get a job. It's very interesting because the BCG, like we do when a candidate's looking for a job, we'll do two things. We'll send them job openings, and we'll send job openings typically at firms of a similar size, and then medium-sized firms if they're a large firm. We will send them, in addition to that, we'll send them a list of firms that we believe that they should apply to even without openings. Most people, even if they're in trouble, will only look at job openings. They won't apply to firms who don't have jobs. And if you've spent any time on my webinars or reading anything that I've ever written, it's always important to try to apply to as many places as you possibly can, even if they don't have openings. The simple reason being is if the law firm has the work and they see your resume and they believe that they can make money from it, then they're likely to hire you. Other law firms will apply to just a few places, hoping for the best and not getting interviews. When you're applying to other large law firms, if you're at a large law firm, you have to realize that that law firm may receive 50 plus resumes for an opening. You just don't know. If you're in a market like New York, what happens is anytime a large law firm has an opening, hordes of recruiters will start calling all the associates in the city that do that practice here and trying to get them to apply. So you have to just understand that there's going to be, in most places, a lot of applications for whatever type of job you're trying to apply to, and you may not be the best candidate. So you need to apply to a lot of places. You can't just apply to a few firms. It's not a smart move. This is just an example. I want to show you of some people that have picked themselves up after failures. Most people have had a lot of failures. If you read anything about like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump, I mean, all these people have had a lot of failures, but they've managed to pick themselves up. This is early on. Amazon purchased the shopping site Junglee, and for $170 million, and they had to shutter the site. They purchased a 50% stakes in Pets.com, and that went out of business. They invested $60 million in Cosmo, which I remember well, and that company went out of business. They purchased a deal site, Living Social, for $175 million and lost over $231 million on that when that failed. They purchased another company, that had the parent company of Diapers.com and Wag.com and all these things, and they shut that down because it wasn't profitable. I think you might remember when they lost the Fire Phone, which is one of its biggest failures ever. They couldn't sell for $199, and they ended up selling them for 99 cents and lost $170 million. Bezos has been divorced. That cost him half of his fortune. And, and he was the subject of national article about this affair he had with Lauren Sanchez, and then a friend of his lover, Lauren Sanchez, I think it was his brother, maybe it was a friend, set up just attacked him as well. He's made a lot of bad mistakes, both personally and financially, but he's still one of the richest men in the world. And he learns from his failures and he makes that more successful in his future. I've been watching Elon Musk, who just rescued some people that have been stranded in space for almost a year when they were supposed to be there 8 days. And he's had tons of failures. Rockets blowing up, all these failures over and over and over again, but they learn from them and it makes them more successful. Think of Donald Trump, who's been, a felon and convicted of all these crimes and had all these bad things happen to him, sued for all the hundreds of millions of dollars and things, and lost and had to pay all this money, but he doesn't, massive, resistance to him and all these different failures. But he yet, all of these people just keep pushing on even in the face of failure. And you should too. There's no reason to quit when you fail or have a bad experience. Look at all the bad experiences of Bezos and Elon Musk and all these people. And so, if you make mistakes, that's often a good thing because you'll learn from them and hopefully not make the same mistakes again. There was a famous quote of Elon Musk where he tried to land a rocket or something on a barge and it exploded. And he said, well, this is great. We've learned, how to land rockets better. And now he's got this whole thing where rockets are reusable and he shoots them into outer space and then they come back and land right on a landing pod. I mean, just, people make mistakes. And so, you can make mistakes too. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, no matter what happens to you, you can recover from them. And you have to be resilient. And resilience means, you can push through whatever happens. You need to keep coming back from failures and succeeding and trying harder and all these sorts of things. And you need to believe in yourself and not allow other people's judgments of you to cloud, what happens to you in the future. I've seen attorneys that have had like these awful starts to their career, like failed the bar like 3 or 4 times, and then worked in a law firm this summer and gotten fired, and then rise up. And I know some people that are, those sorts of things have happened to them, and they're literally at the biggest firms in the world and have huge books of business. I mean, people can learn from all these things. And so, just because you have lost your job or something bad has happened to you, it never means you need to quit the practice of law. I mean, that's crazy. People make mistakes. It doesn't mean you need to go in-house and never work in a law firm. It doesn't mean that you need to take a position that doesn't make the most of your skills. It doesn't mean you need to become a contract attorney. You don't need to become a contract attorney just because you can't get a job. You need to learn how to find a job. You need to read the stuff that I've written and believe in yourself and build up your self-confidence. And, a lot of times people are traumatized by bad experiences and they will just quit the practice of law, or they'll go in-house or go into the government. And the thing about working in a law firm that's different than all of these jobs, like as a contract attorney or in-house or going to the government, is that once you learn how to work in a law firm and get business, you can do it like well into your 80s. I mean, I've worked with firms. I was working with one guy that had start to their career, and you're a human, and every human makes mistakes. You probably made mistakes in relationships. You probably made mistakes in all sorts of things in your life, and you've overcome them. And you need to learn from your mistakes and realize that these things happen to people. People don't always make the right decisions.
Not sure how to help you with that.
Because they make bad decisions, bad things happen. But you need to pick yourself up and realize that a career is a long-term thing. I mean, you could spend the first 5 years of your career losing job after job and making mistakes, but you can still overcome them. I mean, there's so many stories. Like Abraham Lincoln that failed and failed and failed and failed and failed, and then eventually became president. And there's so many people that have failed. And so, no matter what happens to you, especially if you're practicing law, I mean, you have to realize that, you've gone to law school, you've taken the bar, you've managed to become an attorney, and you can't let other people psych you out. People will try to psych you out. Who tries to psych you out? Other associates, if you're in a firm, will try to psych you out. Other partners will try to psych you out if you're in a law firm. I remember
actually my best friend was a partner at had a big, law firm, like one of the top law firms in the world. And he said, what's so scary about being a partner is like, everyone's out to get you. All the other partners are out to get you. They're trying to get you, they're competing for, who gets the most money, and they're competing for clients, and everybody's trying to psych each other out and telling other people that they're not doing a good job. Other associates will try to psych you out and try to say, oh, you should look for another job. Because maybe they're psyched out and they want other people doing the same thing, or maybe they don't want competition. And you just have to realize that you're going to be around people that are going to try to psych you out. The firm will psych you out, other associates will psych you out, other partners will psych you out, and you have to just persist in the face of all this. I know people that have been fired from multiple positions when they were younger. Some people may have had personality problems and or the inability to work for others properly, or not done good work and not been able to take feedback, and people that have been failed the bar multiple times, people that have been unemployed for years and then come back and then end up in the largest law firms in the world. I mean, anything that happens to you, for the most part, you can overcome. And I know people that have had major substance abuse issues, that have like been addicted to crystal meth and serious alcoholics and all these things, and then fix them. I was working with a partner not too long ago that was like a full-on alcoholic, and he was supposed to go to a client pitch. He was the head of the corporate practice group of a major mid-sized very well-respected mid-sized law firm based in Chicago. And he went out to another office of the firm in Minnesota or something, and took a flight there and 9 a.m. and drank. And then he got into this client pitch and was drunk, and he lost his job. And then he went to Alcoholics Anonymous and whatever to clean himself up. And he had cleaned himself up, and I got him a job in a decent sized firm, and as a partner, and he's now very successful there. So bad things happen to people. People get addicted to substances. People have all these sorts of problems. I know one woman that was working in a major New York law firm, and became addicted to crystal meth. And she was not working for 2 years. I mean, she had to go to rehab, and was in Utah at these rehab centers and everything. And she picked herself up and got back on her feet. And if these people can do it, you can too. But I've seen so many people give up. I've seen partners give up. I've seen associates give up and leave the practice of law completely, or do something else because they're defeated. And you shouldn't get defeated. You should realize that your career is like a long-term thing. It's not, just because 5 years of a 45-year career or 50 or 60-year career are bad doesn't mean that the other 55 need to be bad. You just need to learn from your lessons. And giving up is often the absolute last thing you want to do. Now, if you hate the practice of law and you see you're never going to be successful doing it because you don't like it, then that's one problem. But maybe you're in the wrong practice group or in the wrong culture. But if you quit in response to this negative experience, then you're letting other people win, and you shouldn't let other people win. I mean, you should have, enough strength to pick yourself up and keep winning. If you're a criminal attorney, you're always going to probably lose. Most criminal attorneys are going to lose the majority of their cases because prosecutors win most of the time. That doesn't mean the criminal attorney gives up. That means they just keep trying. You can't, let negativity define you. It was interesting. I was working once with this famous public relations guy, very, very well known. And he said to me something that I'll never forget. He said, when bad things happen to people, like in the press and things, like they'll react in 2 ways. Some people will get mad and other people will get sad. And so if you get mad, what that means is you turn that into like rocket fuel, like you let something negative that happens to you, you turn that into rocket fuel and make yourself start trying harder and harder and harder instead of getting sad and going backwards. So, when something bad happens to you, do you get mad or do you get sad? You need to think about that. And, instead of, if you think you're under threat of getting fired from a law firm, one response would be to, instead of checking out, would be to just dramatically improve your performance and do everything you possibly can to become a star and to learn. And you may want to find a firm, where you can be a star, but, usually it's a fixture resistant situation. I had something happen when I was, practicing law. I had two things happen. So in my second summer, I was working in this, major New York law firm in, New York as a summer associate. And, I got my first review and it was, um, not good. I mean, it was pretty scary. They were like, everything's not written in stone, you can still improve. And I was trying to figure out what I'd done wrong because I was doing good work and it seemed like it was well received. I had one thing happen where I turned in some cases to a mid-level associate and she didn't like them and didn't think they were on par. But that was really the only thing that had happened. And I just got this negative review. It was like in this dark room that was wood paneling and they had the room lights turned down, which was very weird. And then I had another woman that had also gone to University of Virginia Law School that was working with me, and she got a stellar review. And I said, what did you do? And she said, I just billed as many hours as I possibly could. That's what I had a mentor that told me that if I do that, then I'm going to get a good review. And so I just went in the last 6 or 7 weeks of the summer. Instead of showing up for work at 9 and leaving at 5, I showed up at 8 and I left at 10. And at the end of the summer, I got an incredible review. So like just stellar. And and so that was something that I thought was interesting. That just being able to work really hard. So that was the first lesson I learned. And then the second lesson I learned was I was working for a judge when a federal district judge when I got out of school. And I would make little typos and things and spell words wrong and forget to put a comma or something this and there. And he would get visibly angry. I mean, I could feel the anger coming off of him when I would make these mistakes. So I realized that, in order to do really well there, I had to turn in work that was like flawless with no mistakes. That was the most important thing. And then I started getting along better with him. But eventually it didn't work out because he was very right wing, and I wasn't really at one political part or the other. But there were people that didn't like that in the courthouse. I got on their side, and that was a big mistake. So, I learned that you have to turn in really good work, and then you have to not get involved in politics. And then when I got into law firms, I got a very good reputation for doing very good work because I never made those little mistakes. And I learned not to be on the side of people that were negative. And I learned that I had to, I had to work long hours, and just doing those three things that I learned helped me turn what could have been a very bad legal career into a good one when I was working. So, but the other thing is, like, if you're in a position where you just can't stay there, you need to start looking for positions aggressively. I have Law Crossings, the site I founded, but what that does is it just looks at every law firm website you can find for jobs that aren't advertised, and that's a source of jobs. But Indeed and LinkedIn are sources of jobs, and you need to, if you are having problems, you need to learn what you did differently, like what you can do differently, what you can do differently in your interviews, what you can do differently on your resume, what you can do differently anywhere whatever you're trying to do. I mean, you need to make sure you learn these lessons. I have some courses that I offer. One of them is called Big Law Breakthrough. And at the beginning of it, there's a 1 hour discussion. You don't have to take the course to watch it. And it discusses all the things you need to do to find a job and to pick yourself up, which is, applying to places aggressively, making sure your resume is focused on your practice area and looks good, and making sure that you know how to interview. Instead of going in you need to be able to interview well, and then you need to be able to do good work where you're going. And so these are all things you can learn. You need to pick yourself up, but you need to make sure that if something bad happens to you, you're doing everything in your power to fix it. The other thing that a lot of attorneys do, and this is kind of one of the worst, is that they don't accept any responsibility for what happens, and they blame things on others. And this is something that isn't good. So a lot of people will blame others for their failure. They won't take responsibility and learn. I told you how I learned that I needed to bill a lot of hours to be successful, that I needed to do flawless work to be successful, that I needed to be on the side of whoever was giving me work and my employer to be successful. And so, people make mistakes, and they learn lessons, and that's normal. But and sometimes you make mistakes and it really is the other person's fault. You could be blamed for something you didn't do. That happens often. Partners will make mistakes and blame associates, and then the associates will be in trouble. But you need to learn from your mistakes and not overreact and blame other people for them. You need to understand like what you can do to improve. I mean, you can improve interviews. I mean, interviews are a very important thing, to learn how to do. And I have lots of webinars on that, and you need to learn how to do that well. Some people go into interviews and they get every single job that they interview for. I've seen people get 5 interviews and get 5 jobs, and what are they doing right? They're acting like the person that is going to work the hardest, that is going to be on the side of their interview. I mean, they're doing all these things that people that don't do well in interviews don't do. And I want to tell you one other thing. So the odds of you getting a job when you go into an interview, for most attorneys, is about 1 out of 8 to 10 interviews. 1 to 8 to 10 interviews lead to a job offer. People that are well prepared and do the right things, they could get 6 out of 8 interviews. I mean, you need to learn all these skills. You need to learn how to fix your resume, all these things. Then you need to learn from your mistakes. And a lot of people have big egos. Like their egos are such that they don't want people to criticize them. And those egos have often made them successful, or helped them by having a big ego. But these egos, make them believe that they're right, and they don't want to be criticized. And and they blame other people for their problems. When I was working, my first job was in a summer associate, or like a summer job in the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. And when I first turned in work, I would get like all these like markups and criticisms, and it was very scary for me. And I would be like, I can't believe that people are like being so critical of my work. And it was good because it was one of my first jobs, and it taught me like you have to think through things and everything. But my ego was such that I didn't like that criticism, and I took it very personally. And instead of like saying, these are all the things I need to learn, and these are all the things I'm being taught. And so, a lot of people will develop rationalizations when their work is criticized, that it's the other person's problem, and that they're right. And then, when that happens, you just need to learn that, you need to ask what you can do differently. When you're working for any firm or any partners or anybody, those people you have to impress them. And just because a client doesn't like what you're doing, it means you have to fix it, and you have to appeal to what the client wants. And when you're working for anyone else, they're your client. When I'm in the business world, I am just astonished. I run across people that are sociopaths, meaning they will steal money from others. I was dealing with an accountant once, and I had paid him $45,000 to do some work for me, and he'd agreed to do it. And when I called him and asked him to do this work for me, he refused to do it, and basically told me to screw off. And I was astonished. Like I paid him all this money. And when I told him, you agreed to do this, he told me to F off, and that he wasn't going to do the job because I got mad at him and refused to return my money. That's sociopathic behavior. And there are people in the world that you will deal with and you will come across that are sociopaths. I mean, you read all the time about people ripping people off and creating fake stocks and Ponzi schemes and all this kind of stuff. And that, exists in the world. And this particular person, this accountant justified ripping me off because I got mad at him for not doing what he was paid to do. And people will play games to justify bad behavior. It just what happens. I was watching a show not too long ago about a woman that where they caught some woman talking about cheating on her husband, and both of the the announcer and then the women were talking about how this behavior was justified because the husband lost his job, and the woman was at fault and looking for a reason, so they blamed the husband, which is crazy. So you shouldn't be blaming others for your mistakes. You should be figuring out how to accept responsibility and learn from those mistakes. If you take responsibility and you learn from whatever happened in your last position, you need to understand if you take responsibility for that and what you could have done differently, then you're probably not going to make the same errors again. So every piece of feedback you get, you should be learning from, and you should be learning from that feedback in order to become more successful in the long run. And that feedback is invaluable. It's very nice actually in the legal profession that your first several years of practice, you're learning your practice area, you're learning how to be a good attorney. People are training you, and you're learning from your mistakes, and that's invaluable. I mean, getting that training and learning how to excuse me, be a better attorney is something that's great. I mean, you're literally getting paid to learn all this stuff when you're a new attorney, and then you make mistakes and then you fix them. And people make mistakes at different points in their career. I was just thinking this partner that lost his job because he had an affair with a paralegal 5 years previously. Like I could have gotten him a job, but he had given up on himself because of that, even though he was extremely successful. So, you shouldn't make that error again. So here are some mistakes that people make that you may need to take responsibility for and fix. So some people will just choose the wrong law firm to work for. I gave you the example earlier of the guy that had this firm that was very politically close to what he did, and he didn't take it. So if you choose the wrong firm to work for, that means that you need to find another law firm. If you are in a bad romantic relationship and that doesn't work out, you're still going to have lots of options in the world of people that will like you or that you'll get along better. You can find a group of people that you identify with better, where you're going to advance instead of where you're at. And a lot of times I've noticed, and I just think this is like such an interesting topic. I notice attorneys that work in like smaller to mid-sized markets and smaller law firms rarely leave the practice of law. I don't think their work's criticized as heavily. I don't know, there's just different types of reasons for that, but people will get out of law school kind of regardless of the law school they went to. They will join, large law firms or small law firms. And the people that join the larger law firms are actually more likely to leave the practice of law or go into other practice settings than people that have joined smaller law firms and smaller markets. It's something that to me is very interesting. So, you go to a large law firm and you're getting, you kind of get shell shocked and you leave the practice of law, where if you went to a smaller market, you wouldn't. So you're much more likely to experience a lot of adversity in a larger market than a smaller market. But it also, if you're going to learn a lot more lessons and become a much better attorney. I love this story. I tell it a lot, but I had this woman that was from Scadam in New York, and her husband was moving to like Martinsburg, West Virginia or something. And I got her interviews at a bunch of firms there, and these are not good jobs. I mean, they were paying, this is maybe 10 years ago, $65,000 or $80,000 a year, and she was making hundreds of thousands of dollars. But she would go into these interviews and just tell people every single thing that they wanted to hear and get the job. And she was these same law firms I had other people interview with from, that were there and so forth. And most of them would never get jobs, but she would just blow them away. She knew everything to say. And I think she got that from her experience of working in a large law firm. She got every job she interviewed for. So a lot of times you will gain skills and things in larger markets that are just exceptional to be awesome in a smaller market. Many times, you just start in a firm and you could have performed better. So people get laid off. And I said earlier, if you get laid off, not everyone's getting laid off. So you need to understand, like, what could you have done to have better relationships with people who had control. So you'll learn how to get work and to be more in control at your next firm. You'll learn maybe you need to work more hours. Maybe you need to learn that you need to start learning how to bring in business and things, and make that a priority. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do, and there's things that you can fix, and you need to. So you need to always be thinking, how can I become a better attorney? How can I do what's expected of me? How can I, protect myself? And then a lot of times people won't learn their lessons. They'll keep making the same mistakes over and over again. They'll go into one employer and be kind of on the side of all the negative people, and then they'll go in the next one and do the same, or they'll miss assignments and things. I've seen people. It's very sad. So I'll see people that I had one guy recently. He was in a big firm in Delaware, and he'd failed the bar twice. So he lost his job, and then he was out of work for a year. And then I got him a job working essentially for a solo practitioner. And I got the solo practitioner to hire him basically by saying, hey, this guy is, had a bad experience. He's going to come to the next firm and work really, really hard and do a good job. And the guy got there and he did the opposite of that. He made excuses. He said he was sick all the time. Then he said, I'm not getting paid enough money and all these sorts of things. So instead of using this opportunity of finally getting a job to improve, he just didn't learn any lessons and didn't apply himself. It was very sad. And, if you aren't billing enough hours and you try not to bill hours when that's expected, that can be a reason. So, all these things, can happen, but anytime you have something bad that happens to you, you need to learn the lesson from it and fix it and go to your next firm and just be much, much better. And people that have had, several bad experiences are often much better attorneys than those that haven't, because they really learn their lessons and they turn those lessons into something to motivate them to do much, much better in their next position. Another thing that people do is, and when they have a bad experience, they think they need a different practice setting. So they think they need to go in-house or to government jobs, or sometimes smaller firms, or take contract attorney jobs. They make all these career decisions just because they've had a bad experience. But most of the time, a different practice setting isn't going to be the answer. Generally not. Every law firm has different practice areas inside of every firm, and those practice areas are different. So you could go to one firm and be a member of the employment group, and that may not be a good place to work at your firm, but in another firm, the employment group may be. So, or you may make decisions about a law firm just because you're reading Glassdoor law firm reviews online or something, when each practice area can be different. So, and have a different culture than the overall firm. So, sometimes you may just need to find a firm where you're comfortable, and you can be comfortable based on culture and all these different sorts of things, and the type of work that they do, where you might not be comfortable in another firm. And so you always need to ask yourself, is a different practice setting going to take care of the issues? And it may not. And just because you've had a bad experience in one firm, it just may be that you've chosen the wrong firm. You don't need to react by going into a different practice setting. I mean, you should always have it in the back of your mind that a law firm is ultimately, if you do good work and then eventually build clients, it's the most stable possible job you could have. When you go to the government, those jobs aren't stable. They can be eliminated. A lot of them. I'm sure you're seeing what's going on in government right now. I mean, the BCG site, like, I'm getting like so many government resumes, people that are losing their jobs. It doesn't matter. There's from the IRS, from the Justice Department, all these people looking for jobs. That turned out not to be a stable job. Or people that go in-house. If you go in-house, companies go out of business, and all these things happen, and those aren't stable. So, being in a law firm is a good career. And you need to realize, if you leave a law firm and go to another practice setting, it becomes very, very difficult to ever get back into a large law firm again, or any size law firm. And that these practice settings are often, much more stable. And, when I say law firms, I mean, there are tens of thousands of law firms all over the country that you can work in, and you don't need to go to another practice setting. You just need to find another law firm, and I can show everyone how to do that at the end of this webinar. But it's really not that hard. You have all sorts of choices. If you instead of going into a different practice setting, you can find a similar firm in your market that just has a better culture, better work. You can move to a larger firm. If you're at a mid-sized firm, you can move to a smaller firm. Smaller firms typically don't have as many hours and often can be much more stable, because it's harder for them to get people to work there. So that could be a good option. You can move to different markets. So people are often much happier in different markets than the market that they're in. I mean, some attorneys want to be in a bigger market. I've seen people from big firms in Detroit, move to New York because they want to be in a larger market. They feel like being in a smaller market is too suffocating. There's not enough attorneys. Smaller markets are often better for people. Larger markets can be better, but there's just tens of thousands of law firms. I mean, there are so many law firms. It's just crazy. I mean, they're starting, tons of them start every day. And just because you've had a bad experience in one law firm doesn't mean you can go to another. And then this is another choice that people make, and I just want to make sure I address it because this is a very serious one. A lot of people will choose to leave the practice of law completely. They'll have had a bad experience, one or two firms, and they think that they just don't want to practice law anymore. And that's a very extreme reaction. It's something that I did, and it wasn't necessarily because I had a bad experience. It was because I found something I love much more. But just because you've had a bad experience doesn't really mean that you should ever leave the practice of law. I mean, people have bad experiences all the time. Think about politicians having bad experiences or business people having bad experiences. It doesn't mean that they have to stop being a politician or stop being a business person. I mean, if a politician quit, being a politician every time they lost an election, I mean, think about that, because if you're running against one person and one person's going to lose and the other person's going to win, it doesn't mean you have to quit. And, a lot of times people have really bad experiences working in major New York law firms, and, they have very long hours, and they're criticized, and people are losing their jobs, and they're in constant threat of losing their positions. And instead of realizing that this have been a valuable experience, they often make the mistake of quitting. I've seen that happen a lot of times, and I think they do it on the idea that every law firm is going to be like that, and it's just not true. I mean, the most competitive law firms in the largest markets, where there's so many people trying to work in them, are like that, but not every firm is like that. I was working with someone that went to a top law school and was let go. Actually, it was a major Washington, D.C. firm after working there for only 6 months. And all that had happened was he had been working for a junior partner. And the junior partner was very excited because they just brought in this client, and they knew the client had a big budget. And so the junior partner was driving him to do work that he thought was unnecessary. And he thought that the answer to the legal question or whatever was very clear and didn't require a lot of work. And he brought this to the junior partner's attention, and basically refused to do the work. And so he ended up getting fired. And because he had such little experience working in in this law firm, they didn't give him a lot of time. He had a very difficult time finding a new position. And at one point, I was representing him. He mentioned to me that he was so depressed about his situation, he was considering committing suicide. And he said that his father committed suicide, and all he did was just made a career mistake. He thought that he could control, shouldn't be doing this work. And, and then he ended up literally, I've been working with him for about 4 weeks, had gotten him a couple of interviews that didn't go anywhere. And the law firm, he ended up quitting the practice of law, and he was someone that gone to like a top 2 or 3 law school in the country, and he's not practicing law to this day. And, he made a mistake, and he just didn't, keep his head in the game and keep pushing. So if you consider leaving the practice of law, it's important to remember you came very far to become an attorney. You need to remember how hard you worked. You remember how difficult it was, and just making mistakes, is not the end of the world. You can always find a job, but if you leave, it's going to be harder and harder. So you need to keep your head in the game. So this is what I would do if I was fired in danger of losing my job, and I'm going to tell you the steps that you should take. I've been doing this for 25 years. I come across countless attorneys each day. When I review attorneys on the BCG website, I will see, if I review 25 attorneys, I will see probably 10 that have lost their jobs or are unemployed. And most of the people, don't take the right actions when this happens. And the first thing is they should have been getting a job while they were employed if they they possibly could, even if the job is beneath them. Because it's much easier to get a job when you're employed rather than unemployed. Because once you're unemployed, what happens is if a firm's interviewing people, which I've said before, you're competing against people for a job that are employed versus unemployed. So, what, you need to do is you got to be very, very careful about under-marketing yourself. If you're in danger of losing your job, have already lost your job, you should apply everywhere you possibly can. I was working with this guy. It was kind of a very sad story. He'd been at a major law firm in like Washington, D.C. or Chicago. I don't remember exactly. And he got an in-house job with a company in Durango, Colorado. And he got there and he bought a house and his kids enrolled in school and everything. And he'd been there for no more than 2 months and the company went out of business. And so he was there and I said, in order to find a job, you're going to need to apply to a lot of places. And he said, well, I'm uncomfortable like sending my resume to a lot of law firms, especially if they don't have business, especially if they don't have jobs. And I said, well, this is, the only way you're going to save your career. And even in Durango, Colorado, there were several firms that I could have sent him to that didn't have work. And so instead of doing that, he decided he should, it was wrong for him to approach all these firms. And even though his whole livelihood and everything was based on that, and couldn't get another in-house job in Durango, Colorado. So, if you're in danger of losing your job, you need to apply, or you've lost your job, you need to apply everywhere you possibly can. Every firm that you can find in your practice area. When I'm looking for people for jobs, I will look at positions that the firms have that are open, like current jobs. I'll also research firms that have strong practice areas for the firm, and I'll send those to my candidates. And I'll contact tons of firms if the candidate will let me, without openings, to see if they have any interest in my candidate. And we did a study one time, and I mean, the majority of candidates that we get jobs for in BCG, we're approaching firms that don't have openings, but a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. But that's very important. You need to, when I'm looking for jobs for people, I will also try to get them to look at other markets. So, if someone's in Los Angeles, I will try to get them to look at, suburbs of Los Angeles and other parts of the state in Northern California. I mean, it's like, for example, if a corporate attorney loses their job or is in danger of losing their job in Los Angeles, there's a lot more firms that are hungry for corporate attorneys in Northern California than there are in Southern California, because Southern California is kind of a mid-cap market. It's not one of the largest corporate markets. And so these are things you need to do and actions you need to take to find a position. I had a partner that had made a mistake and had made that was written about in the papers. And he had 2 months to find a position. And I told him that, because of this, he was going to need to look at several firms, not just in his current market, but in several markets, and he refused. I was able to get him some interviews in his market, the firms he allowed me to apply to, but he never found a position because he wouldn't consider firms outside of his market. Sometimes you need to look at firms not just in your market, but in other markets. And, and then if you don't do that, you may leave the practice of law. So every state that you're in will have other cities and places where you could potentially get a job. And it doesn't mean that, you can't get a job in your existing market, but you need to have a broad search. And, I have lots of attorneys that I work with that won't look at other markets, that won't look at law firms unless there's an opening, that will only look at certain size firms, like large firms, for example, that, make all of these decisions and believes about where they should be working. And because they don't conduct a job search like this way, they don't get openings. They don't think they don't want to look at other markets. They don't want to, look at law firms that don't have openings. They only confine themselves to the largest firms. And because of that, they don't get positions. And, so I had these are just some examples, a life science patent attorney in Milwaukee that had 10 years of experience that were losing their job. And Milwaukee is not a large market for patent law. So he applied to only the few positions that we had for him in Milwaukee. And, but there are not a lot of positions for this particular type of life science attorney in Milwaukee or even in the United States. So, that particular attorney is only going to get a job if he's able to look at other markets. I mean, it doesn't make sense if you're in a smaller market when there's not a lot of jobs or opportunities, why wouldn't you look at other markets? So not looking at other markets is something that will keep this person unemployed, or not looking at every possible firm that does that work or small firm is going to keep them unemployed. I have, a corporate attorney in a niche, a niche specialty in New York that's only interested in working at prestigious firms in New York, and lost his job. And this particular attorney, should have been looking at other firms in other markets. And that's just the case. I had a very sad story. It was a capital markets attorney with, like, I don't know, 12 years of experience or something. He was from Australia, not a work visa, but his wife, I don't know how it worked exactly. His wife was living in New York and he was losing his job. And without success, we applied to a lot of firms in New York and he was too senior. And I got him an interview at a very good firm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And he refused to go on the interview because he didn't think he should be working in a smaller market. And because he refused to go on that interview, he ended up being unemployed. And because his work visa or whatever was going on had expired, he ended up having to move back to Australia without his family. And, very sad story, but someone that wasn't willing to look at, other markets successfully. So you need to often, when you need to be very careful, you need to either look at other markets or smaller firms and so forth if you're losing your job. And I can't, just wrapping up this presentation, you can't underestimate the importance of always being looking for a job. And then when you are looking for a job, looking at different markets if your market's not cooperating with you. Larger markets are very difficult once to get a job compared to smaller markets many times because there's more competition. So you just need to keep all that in mind and understand some of the rules that I've talked about today. So, I just want to be clear that when bad things happen to you and you're looking for a job, you need to market yourself as broadly as possible. You need to look at firms that don't have openings because if law firms are businesses, and if they have the work, they may hire you. You just don't know. So that's something, you need to keep in mind. You need to look at other markets, and law firms do not need to have necessarily an opening to hire you. If they have a need to fill, they will hire you. Most of our placements are with firms that don't have openings. You don't want to be in a situation where, you're going to lose your job and threat of losing your job. If you've lost your job, you need to learn from those mistakes, or if you're in a dangerous situation, you can either learn from it or end up failing. And what you should know, just to comfort you, is most attorneys lose their jobs at least once in their career, many multiple times. And people don't talk about it. If you go to one firm and you've been laid off at the other, you may not talk about it, but you just, you have to realize that you're in the same situation that a lot of people are in, or you may be in that situation in the future. And, you need to either improve and you need to learn from your lessons, or you need to start, aggressively searching for a new position. So I hope this presentation has been helpful so far. I want to just encourage everyone to learn and to improve when bad things happen, to not give up on the practice of law, and to continue trying to get a job in a law firm, realizing that a law firm does provide the most long-term security if you learn from the lessons and things that happen there. So we'll take a quick break for a few minutes, just like a minute or two. And then when I come back, we'll do questions. This is a live webinar, so any questions you answer, I will stay as long as people, want to ask questions. So you can ask any questions you have. You can ask questions about this presentation, or you can ask questions about your individual situation, or just what you should do, or career advice. Whatever questions you have, I'll answer them. I commend everybody for watching this kind of stuff, because it shows that you're willing to learn and improve and try to understand what the legal market's like, and kind of all these different things that most attorneys don't learn. And by learning this stuff, you're really improving yourself, because you're learning just very, very quickly, like what type of things you need to do to be successful practicing law. And very few people take the time to learn this. And some of the things you've learned today could just change the whole direction of your career in life. So I would commend you for watching this. I know I receive emails and things and text, not text, but post responses on LinkedIn and things every week, and people that have learned stuff on these webinars that have helped them. So, I hope, that this stuff has helped you and that you can improve based on the things I've talked about. Okay, so this first question, let me make sure this is a larger font. Okay, I am fired from a law firm. How do I address this in future interviews, like by not making it seem like a red flag to potential employers? Okay, so the thing to remember is people get fired from jobs all the time. Most attorneys will lose their job by either getting fired or laid off or something like that at one point in their career. And it's not necessarily, it can be a red flag if you're unemployed, but there's a lot of ways to address it. You don't want to talk about why you were fired. If you were fired for some sort of mistake or something, you don't want to talk about it. Typically, if you're not working, the employer will already think that you might have been fired, but they're bringing you in because they have the work and they think you can do it. So just remembering that law firms are businesses, and if they're interviewing you, that means they probably want to hire you. Now, you don't ever talk about why you're unemployed in a cover letter or something like that. But if they come in and ask you why you left, you can say lots of things that are popular, or there wasn't enough work, there was a slowdown. That's the most common answer that you can give. But I'll be completely honest with you. When I have candidates that have lost their jobs and are unemployed, most of the time when the firm's interviewing them, they really won't even ask about it because it's just kind of an uncomfortable thing. So I would say 50% of the time, the law firm won't ask about it. If they're bringing you in to interview you, that means that they have the work and they need to hire someone. So, typically the best answer you can give is, there wasn't enough work, something along those lines, or you could just, if you don't want to say that because that's not honest, you could just say, it wasn't a good fit for me. The firm, it just wasn't a good fit. And there could be all sorts of reasons that a firm's not a good fit. Most people that are interviewing you probably have been fired at some point in their careers too. And especially if you're a young attorney, they will often just realize that that's kind of a mistake that that people make. I will say that in the largest markets, where there's a lot of competition for positions, if you're unemployed and you're trying to get a job in another large law firm, it can be very difficult if there's a lot of people in the market that you're competing with, because they have people that are that weren't fired. So what happens if you're fired? You may have to go to a firm that's not as prestigious as the one you were at, and then do a good job there and move up again. But people make mistakes all the time, so it's not something I would worry too much about, and you can recover from. Good. Thank you, everyone, for asking all these questions. It's great. There's a lot of good questions today. Okay, are there particular firms and practice settings that are more forgiving, such as in-house boutiques or government roles, about past terminations? How to identify and target firms that are going to be the most receptive to my applications? Okay, so that's a good question. So there are tons and tons of law firms, regardless of the practice area you're in, that do the kind of work you do. So there's always going to be boutiques. There's always going to be, tons of law firms that you can work in. And I do this kind of presentation. I'll do it again, but I do it on most of the webinars because I try to show people, how many, jobs there are out there for you and how many different places you can possibly work at. So, I don't know what your practice area is. I don't know what, where you're at, but, let's just say you're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you're fired and you think that's the end of the world. You could say, law firms that do corporate work in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm just giving you an example. I mean, that's a pretty small market, I'm imagining. So you do, you look at this and you see there's all these different law firms. If you're fired from McAfee, there's all these different law firms that do that sort of work. Look at this is from BCG. BCG as a list. So you have all these firms in Tulsa that do this sort of work. You have, this is, let's see here. Yeah, your first results from BCG, which is nice to see. But then you have all these other law firms that do it. You have all these different places, just firm after firm after firm, that you could potentially apply to do corporate work. And then you get all these different things here. So there's pages and pages of law firms that do corporate work in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But then you could just say in Oklahoma, right? So you could do the whole state. So then you look at the whole state of, then you have more firms here. And yeah, you have all these different, firms in the state that do corporate work. And so, there's a lot of those as well. So, you need to be very broad in your search if you're fired and try to approach as many places, as you possibly can. And most of these law firms, I don't know about this guy, it just look like he does corporate law. But most of these law firms, if you send them an application, and they have work, will potentially be, interested in you. So that's a mistake that people make. Like they think if they've lost a job, that that there's not places for them to work and they can't find a job. But there's just so many places that anybody can work in any state that you're in. If you just look at, list of cities, and this is, obviously not a huge market, but, you look in Oklahoma and you have all these different cities, and, there are all sorts of different sizes. And so there's just, here's Oklahoma City. If you're working in Oklahoma City, there's 681,000 people there, and there's going to be, the heck did I just do? Oh, here we go. I don't know what happened here. Yeah, there's all these firms of all these different sizes. You don't have to work in Tulsa. You could work in Norman or Broken Arrow or Midwest City. There's going to be corporate attorneys in this. So there's so many cities and places you can work, and people never think about this. They think only about looking on job sites and seeing what's available, and they don't go and find all the firms, for example, in Oklahoma City or Norman, Oklahoma. They don't do broad searches and apply to places without openings, without understanding that the market is huge. Like regardless of where you're in, if you're in Oklahoma, there's probably thousands of firms that do corporate related work, but most people will only look at the largest firms or firms that have openings, and that's what hurts you, and that's what holds you back in your search, is just looking at firms that you think that have openings. And so doing a broad search is just very, very important. You never need to not find a law firm job, because there's always going to be law firms that have work that need you. Do you need to go in-house? No, you don't need to go in-house. There's all sorts of problems of going in-house, because in-house jobs are not that stable. They're difficult to find, and they're even more difficult to find if you're coming from an in-house setting and trying to get another in-house jobs. There are lots of government roles. That's a very good question. There are tons of government roles. There are government roles in every large city in any state, and there are government roles in smaller cities. And people are not you're not going to be held back by past terminations. People are always going to give you a chance if they have the work, because law firms are businesses, and a business needs people to work in them. So if they have the work and they think you can do the work, they will hire you. But yeah, anybody that's fired can always find another job. Okay, what role do legal recruiters play in finding and helping people who've been fired find new positions? I assume that some recruiters might be hesitant to work with someone who's been terminated, while others might see it as another job transition. How do I approach recruiters and present my situation in a way that encourages them to advocate for me? So recruiters are also businesses. So a recruiter, that has a limited bandwidth will want to work more with attorneys that are employed rather than unemployed. But some recruiters are very good. Some recruiters have a lot of contacts where they're talking to people that are in charge of hiring, where they can get those people to potentially, where they can get those people to hire people that are unemployed. So, what role do recruiters play? Well, recruiters are trying to find firms for you that can make money hiring you. So that's the job of a recruiter. If the recruiter has contacts, they can do that for you. That's one thing. If the recruiter can find firms that you wouldn't find on your own, that's another thing. So, there are a lot of opportunities that most recruiters can find for people that you may not find on your own. So I'll just show you an example. Now, this is BCG, and BCG is, our company's, very, very sophisticated in how we can find people jobs. But I'll just show you an example of what we would do for someone that might be. Let me just make sure I load all this and I go to the right account. Pearson demo. Fine. Let me see. I just have to find the right account here. Just show you an example of what a recruiter could do that you might not be able to do on your own, but a lot of times you could do the same thing on your own. Let me just take a random candidate here. So this is, let's see here. I hope this is kind of fun looking at the BCG database. These are not real people. This is Harrison Barnes. This is just an example of an account. So this person saying this person does healthcare in Los Angeles. So if I went and looked at, what are the healthcare openings in Los Angeles, this is something that I would have access to that a lot of people wouldn't. I have all these firms, so you may not be able to find these firms that have openings on your own. So a recruiter can help you apply to those firms. This is an example of a healthcare transactional attorney. I could also, with this same candidate, I could look at firms that have had, positions in the past. I'm just showing what a recruiter can do. And this is what we do, which is, I hope it's kind of fun taking a look at how this works. That can be matching jobs, BCG, archive jobs, and we can look at firms that have had openings in the past that may be interested in hiring you, which is kind of interesting. We can look at jobs. This is just another source of jobs. These are jobs on Law Crossing, so they're not always going to be the same, but looking at Law Crossing jobs can be kind of fun. Let me just pull those up real quick. Just to see how you can find jobs. So we used our Law Crossing site. These are just jobs that wouldn't be on BCGs, and then we find that. We can look at firms that are for example, recommended. And this is 180 firms. So this is this person is interested in my sample account is interested in Los Angeles and San Francisco. So I went and looked at all the firms that do healthcare, but this person was unemployed, and I found 180 in addition to the openings, which is crazy. Look at all these firms. So there are so many firms you possibly this person could apply to. It's 180 just in San Francisco and Los Angeles alone. And and then I could also look at firms that, for example, other searches I could do. I'm finding firms, in this location that might have in the recommended firms. Let me just see what I did wrong there. Regions of interest. There's, so there's just so many different places you can apply to, and a good recruiter can find those. Most recruiters don't do what we do because they only work in response to job openings, but a good legal recruiter can find places for you to apply that you wouldn't apply on your own. So the example would be if you came to me and you said, I need a new job and I've lost my job, I wouldn't just send you to with the 6 or 7 firms that have openings, or there's 10 that have openings right now. I would try to encourage you to apply to 180. So you'd be applying to almost 200 firms, but you probably wouldn't do. But if you were able to do that, that would be something that would help you. Are most recruiters going to do that and advocate for you? If they think you're in the right practice area that's marketable and firms will have business, then they will do that. But if I was you, if I was looking for a legal recruiter and I was unemployed, the more recruiters you talk to, the more openings they may have. And so, if you can get different openings and they have different contacts, then that's going to help you. So, getting on a recruiter's radar can be good. But, I showed you 200 firms. You theoretically could go find those firms on your own and apply to them. But a recruiter can help you. They can position you in the right way and can coach you on what to say. But most recruiters, are businesses, so they're more likely to want to work with people that are unemployed than unemployed because it's easier for them. So that's that. And think about all the work it takes to help you apply to 180 firms. I would do that for you if I thought you were in a marketable practice area, but most people, don't even buy into that. Okay, if a partner or someone influential at my firm badmouths me or gives a negative reference, how do I control the narrative? Are there ways to discreetly check what former employers are saying about me? Should I be preemptively addressing this with recruiters or future employers, and if so, how? Okay, so one nice thing about the legal profession is most attorneys, when asked about the performance of an attorney at a previous firm, will not give negative references. That's just how the legal profession works. They kind of protect their own, and most people are not going to give negative references. That's just something to keep in mind. So if you were fired from a job, most of the time that firm's not going to give negative references. That's just how it works. I saw one woman that had a mental breakdown, and I don't know, was just running through the halls of a big firm, just acting crazy, and literally had to go to psychiatric inpatient or something. And when she was looking for jobs, I even called her references at this firm and they gave her great references. So, most people will not badmouth you when bad things happen. It's just not how it works. Sometimes Attorneys in smaller markets will do that. You know, if you're in a smaller market, you make a big mistake at a firm, and everyone kind of knows each other very well, that may be difficult for you, and you may want to move out of that small market. So if you're in a market with like, I don't know, 50,000 people and there's only 20 attorneys really in your practice area, you need to be very careful. You can't really control the narrative with former employers. Often the best way of doing that is when they do ask for references, you know, try to get references that are going to be good. And usually you'll might work with another associate or something, but try to give references like that. And I have seen people where a law firm is very concerned about their background, not get good references from previous employers. You know, I mean, you know, but not, and so that, like, I had an example of a woman in Chicago that was working in Atlanta, and had worked at like 3 jobs in three or 4 years or something like that, and was currently unemployed. And she was in the process of getting an offer from a firm in Chicago, and that firm wanted to check her references. And so she gave like someone she went to law school with, someone she worked with her first summer in law school. And that kind of made the firm a little bit suspicious. And then when they tried to check her references in one of those 3 firms, people weren't calling back. So, you know, that can be an issue if you have really bad experience at a couple of law firms. But I will tell you that more firms don't check references than check references. So the substantial majority of firms, I would say 80%, do not check references. You're more likely to have people checking references if you're applying to a small firm, like led by a solo or 3 or 4 attorneys are more likely to do it than large law firms. I don't know why that is. Most large law firms, they do check references, will just ask, you know, the dates you're employed, and that's what most other law firms will confirm. They won't really get bad references. So that is a nice thing. And I will say that 80% of the firms won't check your references. So that's, you know, a good thing, I think, to know. And I hope that helps. So let's see here. But yeah, just remember that most firms are not going to check your references. And if they do, then you find some place that isn't. Okay, I've been fired. I'm struggling to find a new job. But what point should I consider transitioning out of law altogether? I love practicing law, but if months go by without a solid offer, should I take that as a sign that I need to pivot? How do I know if I'm giving up too soon versus making a smart career shift? So let me just see if I can find something here for you. Okay, so I'll put this URL in the chat. This is a video that I'd recommend watching. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to sign up and pay for this course, but it talks about, you know, how I had career setbacks and so forth, and how I overcame them, and the things you need to do. It talks about how to, you know, position your resume. It talks about how to apply to firms. It talks about all these things you can do to overcome career setbacks. And it's like maybe a 1-hour presentation. And, you know, it may, you know, it may be something that I would just recommend watching that talks about how to get a position. Let me see if I can put this in chat, if there's a way to do that. Check it here. Chat, if I can put it in chat. I don't look like I can. But this is, I'll send a link to this to everyone that's on the webinar, so you can watch this. But the point is, no, you never need, you can always find a job. So you just, if you're not finding a job, all you're doing is you're not applying to enough places, and you need to apply to places that don't have openings, because just trying to apply to openings is not good. So if you've been unemployed, you're applying to firms most of the time that are getting applicants from people that are employed versus unemployed. If you were an employer, you would probably want to hire people that were employed versus unemployed. I mean, because there's less likely to have been fired and there have been problems with them. So just kind of remember that, you know, when you're applying to firms, is that you know, if you're applying someplace with a lot of competition, that's going to be a problem. So apply to more firms, apply to firms all over your market, apply to firms all over your state, and you will find a job. I can tell you with 100% confidence that most law firms, like a 5-person law firm or something along those lines, is not getting unsolicited applications. But if they do get applications, they're looking at them. So just because you're unemployed does not mean you need to make a career shift. And I would recommend anyone that's unemployed to try to apply and find as many possible places as possible, because you can always get a job. Okay. Let me just see. Okay, let's see, next question. How do I handle my online presence when let's see, 14, 16, when including LinkedIn and legal directors after being fired? Should I immediately update my status or wait till I have something lined up? No, you just put down your last date of employment, and that's it. It's not the end of the world. And then you immediately change it when you get something new lined up. If your law firm, one thing I would recommend too is if you're fired from a law firm, law firms are afraid of being sued. So every law firm does not want to be sued. So people handle this in different ways, and I'm not going to give you advice, but if the law firm has done something wrong, or you have a sense that the law firm may believe that they're doing something wrong, you always want to ask to have more time on the website and to have use of your email and voicemail or whatever. Law firms that fire people will often allow them to stay on the website for 1, 2, 3, or 4 months if you negotiate it when you're fired. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind, is that you need to try to stay on the law firm website as long as possible. And if the law firm gives you a month to look for a job or allows you to stay on the website for a month or two, that's a good career move, because it looks better if you're employed versus unemployed. But again, people get fired all the time, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. Okay, let's see here. And again, anybody that has questions, I would ask them. This is a question I think about, any question you have, I'm happy to answer. Okay, I have complex litigation experience, including law and motion and trial experience from the first 15 years of my career. I left litigation for a management position. I left that job and started my own non-legal business. How do I get back in the legal market? And all anyone sees is I've been out of a legal position for 10 years. Okay, it's the same thing. So you need to, just apply to a lot of law firms, and any law firm, if you spent 15 years as a litigator, all you need to do is find a law firm that can use someone like you, and that's it. So typically that's going to be a smaller law firm. It's not going to be a large law firm. Having left litigation for several years and started your own business can make it difficult, but you can definitely get back in the legal market, because there's always going to be someone that's interested in hiring you. There are tens of thousands of law firms in the country, and all you need to do is find some place that has that kind of work that could use you, and that's it. So, you're 25 years out of law school, which means you're like 50, and you have another 30 years to practice. So, I don't think there's really too much to worry about. The only thing you're up against is you're probably not going to be able to apply to law firms that have legal positions, or that have litigation positions, because they're probably going to have applicants that have coming directly from law firms. So that's what you do, is you just find as many places as possible, like I demonstrated earlier, to apply to, and you will find a job. Okay, let's see here. M&A work is slow right now, and I work in my current firm is also slow, given the market uncertainties. How should I position myself for a move when the market picks up? So, if you're in a corporate related practice area, the law firms can slow down in different markets of the country. Sometimes markets will be active in different parts of the country than in one part of the country. So like Texas, a lot of times stays busy because there's all this oil and gas and energy companies. When markets like in the West Coast or East Coast are slow, there's always markets that you can look at many times that could use someone like you. I had this interesting thing happen not too long ago, where there was this firm in like Fort Wayne, Indiana, that had just massive amounts of corporate work, and they couldn't find people. And I was able to find them people like in big cities and things to go work there. And it was a very, very good place to work. So, all you need to do, when you're in that sort of position is you just need to, make sure that you're applying to as many places as possible. And how do you position yourself for a move when a market picks up? You just start applying to places. And if the market picks up, it'll be employable. So I wouldn't really worry too much about that. Let me just see here. Okay, next question. And by the way, if you're logged into LinkedIn, I won't show your name. I mean, if you're logged into Zoom, I won't share your name if you're asking questions. Okay, I've heard that law firms have been fired due to the quality of their documents. I'm a training support specialist and coach attorneys on their use of technology. Most of the docs I've seen in the last 20 years look terrible internally. Do you offer tech training, Word, Excel, document review platform? No, I don't understand any of that. I apologize. But, yeah, I don't. I understand that. I apologize. Next question. All right, I was let go from my associate position role at a mid-sized firm in August. They don't have enough commercial litigation cases, and the partner I worked with told other partners not to give me work. She didn't want me to be unavailable when she needed me. I immediately took an counsel role with a small firm, but the firm is now dissolving. How do I navigate this unsteady job history during interviews? Well, it sounds like you worked at two firms, and then you got another job with a small firm, but that firm's going away. How do you navigate that? I mean, I think those are all good. I think those are all reasons that can be explained. I mean, you were at one firm that didn't have enough work, so you moved to another firm that had work, and then that firm dissolved. I mean, those are things I think that you can explain in interviews, and those are actually good reasons for being unemployed. And I think law firms would understand that. And I don't see that really being too much of a problem for you. Those are very good reasons for wanting to look for a job and being unemployed. Let me just hear. Okay, so next question. Okay, I expect that I'm about to be fired. What should I be doing right now to protect myself professionally and financially? Well, if you're about to be fired, then you should start aggressively looking for a job, and you should put as much energy as you can to that as possible. You should be, researching the best ways to apply to jobs. It's smart that you're on this webinar because you've probably learned a lot. How do you project yourself financially? A lot of times attorneys, when they're working in law firms, won't save enough money. They'll get overextended. So I would recommend reducing your expenses as quickly as possible. I remember I was in this New York firm in Los Angeles, Dewey Valentine, and there was a 12th or 13th, maybe it's an health counsel guy, associate down the hall from me, and he lived in a very cheap apartment right next to the office, and he worked all the time. And his wife actually would come in. She was from China, and she would make him noodles and stuff in his office during the weekend. And I was like, to save money, I was like, heat him up in one of those, I don't know, but I was like, why are you living so frugally? And he said, well, because I want to make sure I have enough money in case I'm ever let go, that I'm always financially secure. So, I think it's important when you're in any firm, if you think there's any form of instability, to always have a cushion of at least 6 months. And a lot of people don't do that. Let me see. Okay, this next one, if you have copies of the PowerPoint slides, yeah. So I will send out the slides this week to everyone that was on the webinar, and then I will also send out a link to that video that I talked about for you to watch. Let's see. Okay, how do I rebuild my confidence and credibility? It's a good question. Give me a second here. After being fired, especially, I feel like my professional reputation has taken a hit. Well, you just learn from whatever mistakes you made, and then you go into you just go into a place where you can do good work and become more confident. It's interesting in American history. People used to be on the East Coast and have problems with their reputation or done something wrong, and then they would always move west. And some people would stop in Chicago, other people would keep going to the West Coast. And the idea being that your past isn't going to follow you, and you can always get a new start. If you go to another place. So, sometimes it means just, moving someplace else, or it can mean, just, staying where you are and trying to build something up. This one was very interesting. She was in Atlanta and she'd been fired from a big firm there. And I don't know exactly what happened, but she had gotten a very, very bad reputation in Atlanta and was just completely devastated and was having a very difficult time getting a job there. And I started working with her, and I got her out to all these firms in the Bay Area of California when corporate was very busy. And she went into her first interview, I remember, and it was a firm that I had contacts with, and she started crying during the middle of the interview because she was just so scared she wouldn't get the job. And the recruiting person I knew there was very nice and explained everything to me. But eventually she got a job with a good firm in the Bay Area. She learned the specialty of doing software services contracts, and has since started her own firm. It's become very, very successful, and she's doing very, very well. So, many times just moving to a different market can really change the direction of your career. And I've seen so many people move to California for one thing, and really start new careers, because your past won't always follow if you go to a new market. And I just think that's kind of a interesting thing. Okay, this next question, is it ever a good idea to push back after being fired or negotiate something, exit package, or should I just accept it and move on? Yeah, so I'm not going to advise you how to do that, but I have seen a lot of people, negotiate things when they get fired. They'll bring something up, that might have happened that was inappropriate, and they'll bring that to the firm's attention when they're getting fired. I've seen women do that when they're implying that there were some sexual overtures or something made to them. I've seen, different sorts of people do that may think there was some sort of discrimination or something, and negotiate exit packages. I don't know how that's done exactly, because that's not something that I've really ever advised people on. But yeah, people often will push back and negotiate things. Sometimes they'll even have lawyers do that for them. I don't know, what your situation is, but yeah, people do that. And many times they do get good packages, like 6 months pay or something. And do that. I don't know, threatening to sue a law firm is always kind of a dangerous thing, because that can follow you. And if you do sue a law firm, that can follow you the rest of your career. I was working with someone recently who's a very good attorney, and he was very early in his career, he was fired from some law firm, and a law firm was in the process of interviewing him and just did a quick background check and found out that he'd sued an employer 10 years ago and decided not to work with him. So, I think, unless it's absolutely necessary, if you do sue a law firm or something happens to you, there's going to be a lot of that's going to follow you for a long period of time. So, how do you push back? Often if something bad happens and the law firm's in the wrong, then, maybe you talk to an attorney, or if you feel confident, yeah, you can negotiate exit packages. And I've seen people do that and succeed at it. And I don't know how that's done, but because I'm not an employment attorney, but yeah, people do that. Okay, what is the best way to handle a larger than ideal litigation caseload without getting burned out or sick if there's an underlying health issue? Yeah, so that's very common. So sometimes people, litigation could be very, very stressful, and there can be a lot of cases. And one of the problems with litigation is, there's lots of bosses. Like the judge is your boss, the person you're working for is your boss, the client's your boss, and all these people can create a lot of stress. And so, if you're in that sort of situation and it's affecting your health, then you probably need to go someplace where you're not in that position and you can control things better. I will say that I've known lots of litigators that die very early. And I think a lot of the reason for that is it just can be so incredibly stressful with deadlines happening all the time, with, just also having to run to court, all these sorts of things. And so, if you're in that position, sometimes it may make sense, if your health can't handle it, to go into another another practice setting. So, I mean, or, working for the government or something. I mean, you have to take care of your health. And I've seen so many litigators die. So, I mean, very early, like in their 40s and things, from heart attacks and other health problems and getting cancer, they probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So, if you can't handle this and there's underlying health issue, then you either need to find another practice setting or sometimes even another practice area. Like a lot of times people go into trust and estates, or they'll go into, practice areas where there's not a lot of stress, and that can be better. Okay, what is the biggest mistake that attorneys make right after being fired that end up hurting their long-term prospects? The biggest mistake is not getting a job as quickly as you can. So you need to apply to as many places as you possibly can, and try not to be unemployed for any length of time. That's the biggest mistake. And then the best other one is just, as I talked about earlier, is to kind of learn from your mistakes as well. Let me just see here. Questions. Oh, almost done with questions. So if anybody has any more, I think I only have a couple more here, but 3 more. Let's see. Okay, I was let go from my associate role at a mid-sized firm in August. Okay, I did that one. Let's see. Okay, what is your advice for your non-equity partners over 65 who want to continue practicing, have great work ethics and skills, but the firms are moving at that demographic out via reduced salary benefits, et cetera? Yeah, so a lot of major US law firms have mandatory retiring ages 65. So, and they, and some of them just won't let you practice past 65. And will, like you said, move people out, by reducing their salary benefits and so forth. So, when you're in that position, you typically, you should, at the age of 65, you should know a lot of attorneys, and try to network into jobs and working with people that you can. If you can't do that, then you have other options, which are to start applying to, if you're at a mid-sized firms, maybe other mid-sized firms or smaller firms. But if you have you're really good in your practice area, and you offer value to firms, then if people have the work and they can make money hiring you, they will. So, the biggest thing I would just say is that a lot of people don't think about this. They don't think about the fact that law firms are businesses. So as a business, I mean, they need people, need people to bill hours if they have the work, because they can make money. So, so if a law firm has work, I mean, they're going to need people to bill those hours. And I mean, it's just as simple as that. So, you need anybody that doesn't have enough work or is fired, you just need to find someone that has the work to give you. And that means a lot of times, you can apply to firms, job postings and things, but you just need to apply to as many places without openings as possible. I know I keep coming back to that again and again, but it's one of the most important pieces of advice I can give you, because most people will only look at job openings, or they won't do an extensive search. And if you do an extensive search, you're always going to be able to find openings. Let's see here. Okay. About to start a new position. I'm about to start a new position, a litigation firm that wants to add wills and estate plan to the firm. What is the best way to build the transactional side of the practice and get new clients? Okay, so trust and estates is a very good practice area to build clients. A lot of attorneys are able to build get lots of clients doing it. I don't know exactly how they go about it, but I think a lot of times it's just being very active in the community and finding people that need that type of work. It's very easy to bring in clients and do wills and simple types of things. So, if you're trying to, if you're in a law firm and you're trying to get new clients, I mean, you have to network and do all that. I mean, I don't know exactly how it's done. I will say that there are certain practice areas. Let me just do a search here. That's kind of interesting. How to build. Just give me 1 second. So I'm doing something interesting here. Let's see. Okay, so look at this. So I just did this search on Google, and I just did how to build a trust and estates practice course. And here's someone that's going to literally teaching you how to. This woman has this new business model class teaching you how to build a trust and estates practice. This would probably be pretty awesome to watch this. And then you have all these different certifications and ways to learn about how to build a trust and estates practice. I mean, there's here's an estate planning course. I mean, there's courses that can teach you, but this one right here, this woman has a class on how to do it. So that's actually pretty cool. So a lot of times, if you're trying to get business in certain practice areas, there's literally courses and things that will teach you how to do it. And I certainly can't teach you how to do it. And I have articles and things I've written about how to develop business, but that right there would be one resource, which is kind of cool. Let's see here. So a lot of times, I mean, there's literally resources online that can help you, with these questions. Okay, I'm 67 years old. I graduated from a top 20 law school in 1990. I was 33. I got myself a job at a then up and coming boutique in Los Angeles. 6 years later, I got myself 2 offers from 2 different AmLaw 100 law firms. One to do patent prosecution, their patent litigation. I took the litigation job. 3 years later, I parlayed that into a patent litigation job at a AmLaw 100 top 10 law firm in Silicon Valley. Within 2 years, I went in-house as the first IP attorney at a medical device pharmaceutical post-startup. The stock plummeted, so I parlayed into IP counsel for a Silicon Valley business unit of a Dow 30 company-wide layoff in 2005, and I just couldn't get on legal horse. In 2019, I started legal temping, 1 year for patent pro-life, 4 years at a major Silicon Valley internet company. And then the project ended, so I'm 67 and not sure, go back to law or do something else. I'm not wealthy enough to retire. Yeah, so what you're talking about is a fairly common thing. So a lot of times attorneys will start out at law firms, they'll work at different law firms, and they'll go in-house, and then bad things will happen in-house. And then they will be unable to find positions. And so now you're in a situation where where you're not sure what to do and you're 67 and you don't have enough money to retire. So my advice to you would be sort of the same thing that I've advised several times in this webinar, is trying to find different places that will hire you based on approaching firms and things that may not have openings. I've had situations. I had one patent litigation attorney that was similar to you that I remember placing at a toy company in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that was suing, I don't know, people in China that were knocking off its toys or something. There's always positions for whatever you're trying to do. You have a very good in-house background, so you could certainly apply to a lot of places. When you get into your mid-60s and stuff, there definitely is age discrimination. So most law firms will prefer to hire younger people. Most law firms will prefer to hire people that are coming out of other law firms. But, I don't know if you're in Silicon Valley, but what's interesting about Silicon Valley is there are so many, hundreds probably of these very small firms that do IP work. They do, prosecution. They may do a little bit of litigation. So, you just need to find as many possible places that you can apply to. If the firms have the work and they think they can make money by hiring you, they will. If you want to do something else other than practice law, there's lots of other professions and things you could do. But typically, you want to try to get a job, practicing law. And I would just recommend trying to find as many places as you possibly can and applying to them. And it can be, it could be devastating because it may be hard to get interviews. And when you do get interviews and they see how old you are, that can be difficult to close them sometimes. So the only thing you can do is work as hard as you can to find places that may have the work to give someone like you. And there are places like that. There are going to be places in Silicon Valley, and there'll be places all over California where you can do that. I had an interesting thing happen once. I had a partner that was in his mid-60s. He was working at a AmLaw 100 law firm in Denver, and he did the same thing you did. He did patent litigation and patent prosecution. What was interesting about his patent prosecution background is he had experience in something that I don't remember what it was. It was something to do with optics or something. And but that was pretty much what most of his patent prosecution stuff was in. And it was a very kind of narrow specialty. And so he was forced to retire at the age of 65 and was kind of out of there and real negative and stuff. And I got him a job at a firm in Texas. It was like San Antonio or something that had clients that needed this sort of optic work. And all I did was I searched the BCG database for that specialty they had doing this type of optics. And I found this firm, and these two people couldn't believe that they found each other. It was like the greatest thing ever. And this guy had never even been to Texas. I mean, he was in Colorado and, and had always worked at this firm. And so I got him a job there. So sometimes if you have some sort of very narrow, maybe it's medical device or pharmaceutical, I don't know what it is, very narrow specialty in patent law, then, searching for firms that do that type of work or similar type of work can be great. And it's especially the case in patent prosecution. There's all sorts of niches and things you can go into in a patent prosecution that if you have that experience, you can find firms that need that. And so that's what I would recommend if I was a patent prosecutor. Litigation is a little bit more difficult to get jobs in sometimes, but prosecution is if you have a specialty, it can be good. And you can always find a job. You just need to apply to different places. Okay, what's it? Best way to do as many billable hours if it is difficult to do the minimum amount of billable hours required. Well, so when you're billing hours, you can bill as many hours as you want to different matters, and then the law firm can write them off. So, typically like what an attorney will do is they will do the work, and they will, if they can, they will work very hard on it. They'll do the best job they can, and they will, especially a young attorney, will bill as many hours as they possibly can to a matter. That doesn't mean you want to be dishonest to the client, but if you can do better work and bill more hours, then you're going to be usually better off. And it's up to the partners to write off your hours to the clients. But trying to work as hard as you can in different matters is, smart. So what does that mean? So, if you're writing a brief, you can always research and find as much case law and analyze the case law. You can always proofread your work more. You can always, keep refining, a memo or whatever you're doing as much as possible. And it's up to the law firm to write that off. Just if you can do the best work you can, and it requires more hours, then that's good. And it's typical with some large law firms is they will work up matters. They will spend a lot of time and a lot of hours on matters for large clients because the clients will pay it. Other firms are small and you have to work less hours. But typically the job of an attorney is to work as much as you can on things and get your hours as high as you can. Like partners in law firms will do a project for a client, but then they'll suggest doing even more work on a project and even more work. And so that's just something to kind of keep in mind is, trying to really get your hours up as much as possible is kind of the game. And, it's not like you're doing anything unethical. It's up to the law firm to write off your work. I was at a firm once where my last firm, where there, if you build like 2,000 hours or something, you would get I don't know, it was like a $35,000 bonus. And so, I wanted to get that $35,000 bonus, and the firm didn't have as much work as they could have, but I was able to get assignments to write memos and things. And so instead of, just writing this memo and spending 10 hours on it, I would spend 50 or 60 hours or maybe more, 100 hours on the memo, just doing everything I could to write the best memo. And so one day someone walked into my office and they said, you've been billing a lot of hours on these memos. We want to show the client, everything you've worked on. And I had printed up, 50 plus cases and then all these law review articles and everything. And so I had them in all these different boxes and I marked them up. And so they took all this work that I'd done, all these memos, and they laid it out on a big conference room table, and all with all my scribbles and everything on it. And then I even gave them different drafts of this memo. And so when the client came in, they were like, wow, this guy's really, really worked hard. Now, I don't know if they paid the whole bill, but that enabled me to get my bonus. And most people would have written those memos and, spent far less time on them, but I did because I wanted to get a bonus. And I don't know if the client paid it, but I was looking out for myself and getting as many hours as I could while doing, the best work I could. Okay, what is your best tips for achieving work-life balance in a larger firm requiring a high level of billable hours? So the best piece of advice that a partner gave me once that I was friends with was, no one is ever going to tell you to stop working hard. So no one is ever going to tell you to work less hours because it's not in their best interest to do so, because they make more money the more hours you bill. So, how do you achieve work-life balance? You set deadline, you carve out time for yourself to work, as many hours you want to, and you try to work as many hours as you can. And then you try to make sure that you carve out time for yourself, and do it in a way that you're comfortable with. And if you don't think you want to keep doing that, then you don't. One piece of advice I would give you for any attorney in your first 5 years of practice, it's always a good idea to, especially if you're young, to work as hard as possible, because you're learning and you're learning your practice area. And it's the same thing that happens with, if you go to medical school, you'll have to be a resident and work like 36 hours straight and all that sort of thing. And so, in the legal profession and the medical profession, people when they're very young often work very, very long hours. That's just how it works. And so you're getting training when you're young. So when you're young, at least your first 5 years of practice, you shouldn't worry too much about work-life balance because you're just learning. And then after that period of time, you have the option to take your work somewhere else or to work in a less stressful environment. But billing a lot of hours, it takes there's not this rule, like Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, and it's like it takes about 10,000 hours to learn anything. And he talks about the Beatles and all these people that got all this experience and became very proficient. So learning how to work hard early in your career is good, and then you can always go into an environment where you don't have to. But no one's ever going to tell you not to work as hard as you are. And if you don't want to work those incredible hours, just do good work for the hours you're working. But that's a big piece of advice. Okay, if you move to a new state, won't the law firm make you take the bar? Hopefully waive in. Yeah, so if you move to a new state, you're going to need the bar there. There's two types of practice areas. There's federal practice areas, which are things like patent and trademark, ERISA, where you're practicing law, federal law, which the bar exam is not as important because you're working in patent and trademark, you're working for the patent and trademark office, and you have to be admitted there. That's federal. But then there's practice areas like litigation, things where you're going to need to take the bar exam or waived in. So yeah, so you have to do that if you move to a new state. In certain states, are going to want you to have the bar before they hire you. The biggest states are in California, Texas, Florida. It's very hard to get a job in those states unless you have the bar. So because everyone has to take the bar there, you can't waive in. But yeah, you have to have the bar waive in if you're doing that. Okay, what is the best way? Okay, let's see here. What is the best way to deal with a yelling and aggressive supervising attorney, not letting distract or lead you to leave the position? Yeah, so there are firms where there's a lot of hostility going around and yelling and aggressive attorneys. That should not, that is something that you certainly don't want to deal with, if you're in a law firm. And so if you're in that sort of position, you need to avoid those sorts of people. So there are toxic people in a lot of law firms. And if there's someone that's very toxic, you need to do what you can to avoid that person. You can't, you don't want to work for them because nothing good's going to come of it. And If it's a small firm and there's someone like that and you can't avoid them, then you probably want to leave the position. But you need to avoid, there are toxic people in every firm, and you need to avoid people that are toxic. That's just how it is. And if you do deal with them, you need to be very careful. So that's a good question. Okay, other questions? Let me see. I'm just making sure I've asked all the questions here. I think I've answered most of the questions. There's one here from a Kenyan lawyer, just to answer this real quickly here. I don't really know how to answer it, but I'll respond to it. The Kenyan lawyer has been looking for a remote legal job in the USA, like legal offshoring, and also wanted to start offshoring recruitment for those in need of remote jobs in my nation. I've successfully landed, 8 to 10 interviews with US and UK law firms, but a lot of them had a problem with my geographical location despite successfully interviewing. Yeah, I don't have any advice. I mean, I don't know how someone from Kenya could get a position in the US. I think that would be very difficult if you're in Kenya, remotely. Law firms will hire people to work remotely from different states and so forth. So that's not impossible, but I don't know how you would get a job in the US as an attorney working from Kenya. But I mean, that's great. You've been able to get 8 to 10 interviews. I don't understand how you would go about this. I would think if you were a Kenyan lawyer, you would need to have the bar where you want to work and then be there in order to get a position. I hope that helps. Okay, do you offer some advice on working on BCG attorney search? So if you work with BCG, I mean, the biggest thing that we look for when someone's coming in is someone that has solid experience in a practice area and is typically coming from a law firm. So those are kind of the most important things. And then once you start working with BCG, the biggest thing is just the number of firms and jobs you approve are going to increase your odds of getting a position. But BCG will typically, we're selective, but, very selective, but the only thing that we're really looking for is someone that has very good experience in one practice area. And then, is not too junior or usually, and then if you're senior, you have to have very good experience in a practice area and then coming from a law firm. That's really kind of the main things that we look for. And there's a lot more, but that's kind of the general tone. Okay, next question. Can an associate or partner get in trouble ethically if the firm is taking on too much work, more than the number of attorneys can handle? Generally not, so firm has too much work, that I don't think they can get in trouble for having too much work. The only way they get in trouble with the work is if people are doing a bad job and making mistakes and things that are harming the clients. So that's kind of the main thing, but a lot of firms will take on an incredible amount of work. It just means that they won't typically work the files as heavily as, they won't work the matters as much as they possibly could, which might happen if they didn't have too much work. Is a good resume on LinkedIn important? Yes, a good resume on LinkedIn is important. So employers will always usually look at your LinkedIn profile. So your LinkedIn profile needs to be good. If you're trying to get a job in a certain practice area, your LinkedIn profile should focus almost exclusively on that practice area. So the mistake a lot of attorneys make is they list a bunch of different practice areas that they've worked on and their resumes on LinkedIn, and then they're maybe applying for a job doing a certain thing. So an example would be if you're doing corporate law, but your last job was litigation, and the job before that was IP, you would only talk about your litigation experience in your current job, and then you would probably not say anything about whatever practice areas you were practicing. You would just write down you're an associate or something in those previous firms. So your resume should only be focused on the practice area you're trying to get a job in. And then you always want to de-emphasize things where you may not have practice areas you may not have worked on. Where you're not trying to apply for a job. Okay, well, thanks everyone for being on the webinar. I appreciate everyone's questions. And then I think this was a really good webinar. We learned a lot about how to handle getting fired, how to have persistence. And I commend everyone for spending all this time watching this today. I think, obviously the more stuff you learn, the better off you're going to be. And just everything you learned today, just if you were to watch one webinar ever, can help you tremendously, in the future and become a better attorney, stay a better attorney, and continually, have resilience and do better and better. So again, congratulations for watching this, and I'll talk to everyone next week. Thank you.